Live the life you love.
All right, we are live. I'm excited to introduce everyone to Miss Allison Ross. Allison, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was going through your Instagram channel, and I don't know if it's your dog or if it's a friend or family dog, but you have a big, beautiful husky. I saw those pictures.
Yeah, he's actually an Alaskan Malamute, so he's like supersized husky. He's
Nice.
about 105 pounds.
Wow.
And so excited that it's finally winter in Kansas City because that's his favorite season. He loves it. He's got like a guard coat and then an undercoat, and so he's just constantly hot all the time. And so he loves the snow.
I always wanted to get like a dog like that, but everyone was always saying, well, it's so cruel to have a dog like that in Florida because it's so hot all the time.
No, you buy them a pull outside and they're fine. There's people who have those dogs in Texas. I mean, I've seen them in Florida. That, you know, dogs are so adaptable. I mean, they're so very, very adaptable. So if you wanted a dog like that had a double coat, just keep him in the AC when it's the hottest part of the day and take him for walks early and late, and he'll be just fine. I mean, it gets over 100 degrees in Kansas City, and he does. He's fine.
I'm gonna tell my wife we need to get a pool just so we can get a dog. I love it.
That's a good angle. That's a great angle. Yeah,
that's a good angle.
Dog.
It's we have a baby. We have a dog. We need a pool.
Yeah, right.
When we were chatting on email, you're speaking of your social media channel, right? You're talking about how you left Facebook and you're on another social platform. And you know, musicians are always trying to figure out what social media channels should they be on. Should they be on all of them? Should they be posting content on all of them? And it's really where your audience is, right? What are the channels that you're on, and why are those the platforms that you're choosing to post your content on?
This is such an interesting question right now because I'm very much in transition. So I will tell you why. I was on Facebook, like we all were at the very beginning of Facebook, when, you know, it came out right as I went to college. And so that's how I was making my connections with like fellow freshmen who I wanted to get to know. And back then it was just kind of a system to rate the cute guy in your music theory class. And since then, it's just completely exploded over the last decade and a half. And Facebook got it got intolerable to me, and I got to the point where I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And so, even though I was doing so much of my business, and so I mean, I had 3 different pages for a nonprofit that I run, for my private studio, and then just my personal page for family and friends. I had so many things happening on Facebook, and this year, what really turned me off from it was all the talk about the virus and just how poisonous the atmosphere got on Facebook. Not just the misinformation, but the people that were on Facebook were getting to the point where I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I mean, I'm not interested in artificial conversations on a screen. I mean, if I want to talk to somebody, I'm going to talk to them in person, you know, and it just occurred to me one day, like, well, if I really want to have conversations with people, I can text them, because people who I want to talk to are people that I actually have in my real life, not on a computer, you know? So, but what happened was we got to March when, you know, everything kind of hit the fan and with the virus and all of that. And I was thinking one day, I went, well, I'm just going to wait for this all to blow over. And then I realized that immediately following the virus was going to be the presidential election. And I went, nope, I'm out. Like, I don't want to deal with this. So I actually deactivated my Facebook account a couple months ago, and it has been great. And I'm never looking back. I mean, I will never be on it again. I kind of backed up all of my photos and kept some things, you know, for like writing purposes or whatever videos that I wanted to keep. And I just went, okay, I'm moving on. So one of the things I found that was cool was there's a couple different alternatives. There's a lot of different alternatives.
Yeah, a lot now. Yeah.
I've really gotten into Parler. I made an account, but I haven't really explored it yet. So I can't say much on that. I mean, I'm on it, but I don't really use it. The one that I'm really getting into is MeWe. And the reason because the format is very much like Facebook. You can read something, you can react to it with an emoji, you can share content, you can post original content. It's very similar to Facebook. So I started on MeWe, but like anything, it starts small and you have to start something. So there's not a lot happening there. I mean, it's not very active yet, but I really think it's going to be. I think it's proof that it's a great alternative. And firsthand, I've seen a lot of people on Facebook who have switched to MeWe. So hopefully growing that, and hopefully it gains ground, because I think things like that are the way to go. Never been on Twitter, can't stand it. What else is there out there? There's another great thing called minds.com. I don't know. Have you heard of this?
Minds?
Minds.com. Yeah.
I've not heard of that, no.
Well, I actually heard about this on the Tom Woods show. He interviewed the guy who set that up.
Okay.
And he was talking about how it's open source, decentralized, all of the good stuff, free speech network. And so I checked it out. Again, same thing. I'm on it. I'm not that active on it. It kind of needs to gain some ground, but this is the time that is going to happen. I mean, we've seen even over the past year, Facebook is just crumbling because people are just sick of it. I mean, they're just sick of it. So
how is MeWe different? Like, how do you feel about like the content that people are posting on there?
I am still exploring it. I'm still very much in the beginning stages. Obviously, it's not as ad driven, right? So Facebook has become this big oversaturated commercialization. So I mean, you're scrolling through Facebook and you look at something and you're not sure if it's an ad or something your friend posted.
Yeah.
You have to kind of investigate that. So MeWe is very good about what you're seeing is something that somebody put up. And that's it is right now. And I really hope they stay that way because it's a really nice format. It's what Facebook used to be.
Yeah. Is it also an algorithm like on your, I guess, your news feed, or is it most recent posts?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I need to check that out. I'm not sure yet. Really, what I'm using it for so far is I'm using it to connect with the few people that I know that are on it. But I'm also kind of just exploring like liberty pages. So like libertarian content or free speech content, because that's what keeps getting shut down on these other platforms. So I'm just kind of trying to fill up my newsfeed with different things that interest me and kind of see what happens. And so as I build it organically, hopefully that will be reflected in the newsfeed, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing why I haven't left Facebook yet is all the pictures and all the stuff. Because my favorite thing about, I guess, Facebook, and reason why I post on Facebook, is I love seeing the memories. So like, what did I say a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago? And some of the stuff I'm posting, like, yes, I'm playing a little bit devil's advocate because like I'm like, all right, I'm libertarian. Like, I don't like the Republicans or the Democrats, so I'm gonna post stuff that gets all of them riled up. And I kind of want to look back at that in a year from now or 2 years from now and see what people were saying and see how their opinions change. And that's like the main reason why I'm still on it. But otherwise, pretty much all social media is like gone from my phone now. And it's been the best thing ever, deleting those apps from my phone.
Yeah. Isn't it so freeing? You look down at your phone.
Oh my God.
I have 37,000 notifications. It's funny you say that about Facebook memories. After I deactivated Facebook, the one thing I did was I kept a tab up on my computer. That was this is before I deactivated it entirely, but for about a month or so, I kept it up with a bookmark that just sent me directly to Facebook memories. So every day I would check in with Facebook memories and be like, is there anything here I want to keep or save? And so I did that every day for about a month. And there were some things there that were valuable. Like I'm doing a lot of writing now. And so there were some stories or, something I posted that was helpful for that purpose. But after a while, it was just like, I don't know, I can do this another time. I really wanted to get rid of Facebook 100%. So that's what I did. But
that's interesting because
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's interesting because like that's the one social media platform where I have like all the security settings on. So like unless you're my friend, you're not gonna see my posts. And everyone that I'm friends with on Facebook, I know somehow, like either they're an acquaintance, I've worked with them before, or they're an actual friend or family. But yeah, what you're talking about, like even that, I'm so blown away of like how toxic it is just from people I know. Like I'm surprised by what some people that I know are posting, and just like, wow, like maybe I should get off of here.
Bad out there. It's bad out there. So the other thing I was going to address is you said, you brought up the question as far as how do you market yourself? And one of the things that kept happening is that I would, so I work in the classical field. I'm primarily a classical violinist and pianist, although I do other things. But one of the things that kept happening with Facebook is I would post a video or I would post something that I recorded and it would be taken down within 24 hours. And I get a message that was like, we're taking this down because you don't own this material. And I'm like, well, it's Beethoven. I mean, yeah, I didn't write it, but they were getting to the point where they would not let you post anything so I would work an hour and a half on something and I put something up that was promoting like a foundation that I volunteer with. And so I would say, hey, I'm going to raise money for this foundation by playing this music for 90 minutes. Next day it would be gone. And I'm just like,
because Beethoven's like, isn't that public domain? Like anybody can.
That's what I'm saying. And so I could do 89 minutes of Beethoven. And if the final minute was something that technically someone somewhere owns the copyright to that material, they would take the video down. And I finally was just like, I want to be somewhere that I can play what I want to play and not worried about about that. So I do understand where they're coming from. Somebody owns that material and they want to give them due credit, but I mean, it just got so authoritarian. I was like, okay, I'm not.
That's crazy. Because even like on YouTube, when you're putting up covers and they might flag it and say you can't monetize this video, but they'll still keep it up. That's wild that Facebook's taking them down. Were these videos you were doing, were they like pre-recorded videos? Were these live videos? Like what were you experimenting with?
It was a mixture of both. It was a mixture of both. So some of them I would prepare and then upload, which is really disappointing because you spend a lot of time preparing like a box of nut or something and then it's gone. But a lot of times what I would do is a Facebook Live. And we've seen how this has been such a problem. I mean, they are just taking videos down right and left. And they don't even need to give you a reason for why they're doing it. They're just like, that does not adhere to community guidelines or whatever their line is. What does that even mean? What does that mean?
Right. Yeah.
So I really got fed up with it. And I just thought, the people in the world need social media. They really rely on this resource, especially now during a pandemic. There will be alternatives. And so I put my faith in that. And sure enough, there's been lots of other options and they've been way better. Yeah.
But for these live videos, were you doing like virtual tip jars too? Or were you doing them just kind of to connect with people and play for people? Or were you actually trying to monetize it as well?
That was both. It was totally both. Usually when I do that, it's not to make money for myself. It's one of the things that I do is that I volunteer with the Vasculitis Foundation, which is kind of a whole separate story. It's like a rare autoimmune disease that I was diagnosed with. And so in an effort to give back in my adult life and in my career, I spend a lot of time volunteering for them. And I recently was voted onto the board. And so I'm now the secretary. Oh, cool. Yeah. So it's a position with a lot of prestige, but a lot of meaning for me. I mean, because it's such a personal thing. Yeah. So one of the things that I would do is like on Giving Tuesday every year, I would say, okay, we're going to do a Facebook Live and we're going to try to raise $1,000 or $2,500 or whatever. So that was one of the avenues I was doing that. And this year we pivoted entirely and we went to Zoom and we had a private Zoom meeting that was like, hey, if you're interested in being a part of this, log on to Zoom and then here's the website where you can donate. And that just turned out to be so much better because we're not being censored for the music that I'm playing. I mean, what if I'm trying to do good and Facebook is just going, you don't own that material. And I'm just like,
come on, Facebook. Is that the nonprofit? Because you mentioned a nonprofit. Is that the nonprofit that you're part of?
Yeah. So I did have one called Violin for Vasculitis Inc. And so that's kind of that's where I took my music and started being an advocate for the cause of vasculitis awareness and for autoimmune disease kind of in general. But that is kind of it's connected to the Vasculitis Foundation. So they are a registered 501c3. I am a registered 501c3. And obviously mine came to a complete dead standstill in March because I couldn't travel. There was nowhere to go. I mean, I had 7 concerts planned for this year and they were all decimated just like that. Like within a week, they were all canceled.
Heartbreaking.
So this work that I'd done, all of the research, all of the plane tickets bought, everything canceled.
Oh man, that sucks. It's so crushing.
Yeah.
Our industry got destroyed this year.
Yep, it really did. Like obviously that's been on hold and a lot of the this is kind of pivoting another direction, but I mean a lot of the orchestra work I was doing that was canceled. And the orchestra work I was doing, we would show up and they'd have us take like blood tests and wear an N95 mask and all this. Yeah, and so I spoke out against it pretty publicly. Well, actually, this is how you and I got connected, is because I wrote something to Tom Woods, and I said, "Hey, this has been so frustrating, and I appreciate you speaking up against lockdowns and all this stuff." And he responded and said, "Oh no, that's great. Can I share your words with my email list?" And then I think that's where you read it, and
so we got connected.
Yeah, and so I was just so completely frustrated by the restrictions they were putting on musicians, and this is just the classical world. I mean, I'm not really sure what it's been like in more like rock or like recording.
Oh, I can tell you.
yeah, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, but I guess I know you've told this story before on other podcasts, but I'd love for you to tell the listeners the story of what happened. And just one quick thing I just thought of before we started recording. I usually have like my little jargon that I always say. I forgot to mention, in case you hear me make like some kind of like nasally sound or something. I have Tourette's. So speaking of nonprofits, so yeah, nothing's wrong with me. But if you see any weird twitches, that's just my Tourette's.
Cool. Well, Yeah, I mean, good for you for just being open about it and being like, yeah, this is who I am. So
Yeah, I on all my YouTube videos, I actually have like a little Tourette syndrome awareness note on all of them at the bottom. It's like it says, "What's that sound?" And it's just I have Tourette syndrome, and
nice.
I have a link to the Tourette Syndrome Association and everything to help maybe try to raise some money or awareness for it.
That's so cool. I really like that, and so like you, it's kind of a personal cause,
Right?
and also something that you want to draw attention to. But it's interesting that you, with that, you then decided to be a podcaster because you
Yeah.
think that's one thing that would be that you'd want to avoid, and instead you're just like, no, I'm going to do it because I want to do it. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
props to you.
And like it's funny because like the ticks come and go. So like this vocal tick is I call it my AEG tick because it started when I started working for AEG. And I know because I was like on the road all the time and the stress level was higher and anxiety level was higher. And this tick came out of nowhere. And now it's still there, even though I'm not with them anymore. So it's my AG tick, and hopefully it'll go away one day. But it's definitely made me very self-conscious, like doing a podcast and being on video. But we just had a kid, and I want to lead with a good example. Like I don't want him to run away from things because he's worried about what other people think. So I'm gonna lead by example. And if the podcast does grow and there is some internet trolls out there and they have some bad things to say, whatever. Like usually when people bash someone online, it's because they're going through something that we have no idea about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, screw them. Haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Exactly. But yeah,
well,
share the story. Let's go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say I didn't know that, and that's actually kind of awesome and inspiring. I'm glad you took the time to mention that because I wasn't aware. So yeah, good for you.
So share the story. What happened with your symphony? So I guess walk me through it at the timeline. Cause like March. So I wasn't with AEG. I was on the rock and mainstream side. And for us in March, everything just completely shut down. Like every concert got canceled. At first postponed and rescheduled, and then canceled. And that's just saw one cancellation after another. And before you know it, thousands of us got laid off or furloughed. And yeah, and I can go deeper into that. Maybe we'll go into that. But I want to have you share your story of what you experienced with the symphony.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that your listener base is pretty wide and you have all kinds of different musicians out there. And so if there's anybody that's kind of in more of a classical field, they're aware. And for those who aren't, I'll just explain. I mean, when you go to conservatory, there's kind of two routes you can take. It's like, all right, practice my butt off and get a full-time job in a symphony orchestra. And that's going to be my career with the salary and benefits and everything. Obviously, those are hard to get. It's very competitive. Or you can say, which is what I did, you can go, I'm not sure that's really my jam. I'm going to instead devote my time to many different things all at once. I'm going to diversify. And that is such a thing I cannot say to people enough, especially now. Diversify yourself. It's so important that you're not just doing one thing, because then when you do get laid off or canceled or whatever, you've got something else to fall back on, right? So that's where my adult life led me. Is I said, okay, I have this degree in violin performance, and then I have actually 2 degrees in string performance. But classical music. With that, you can do a lot of different things. You can teach, you can perform, you can do what you're doing and try to monetize a podcast. You can write, you can I mean, you don't have to just say, well, I'm a classical violinist and so I'm going to play in an orchestra. So I was working in about 4 or 5 different avenues at the time that the pandemic hit.
Different orchestras or?
Well, no, actually just totally different things. So like,
okay,
so one of them was playing in orchestras, but not just one. It's like I would, I'm in Kansas City. So in about a 500-mile radius, we've got Kansas City, Omaha Symphony, Fayetteville, they've got a good orchestra. And then you can even go down to Texas, which is only like 8 hours away, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, or way out in Western Kansas, there's a couple, and then in Wichita. So, I mean, you could part-time sub with all of these orchestras and make a pretty decent do everything. So that is something that I was doing. That was part of my job. That's probably the thing that got hit the most by the pandemic, just because no orchestras were playing.
Right.
The other things that I was working on are my kind of day job, if you will, is that I'm also a proficient pianist, and so I'm the accompanist for a high school choir in my district for a public high school. So that's another thing I was doing. Obviously, Kansas was the first state to call it through the end of the year, like, yeah, we're not going back to school.
Wow.
through the rest of the year. Like
Oh, so you're not even going to school right now.
No, well, this was in the spring. This was in
Okay.
March that said that. So like through the end of the year. But then yeah, this year has been, we were out and then we went for a few weeks and now we're back to virtual. So I mean, it's flipped all over the place. I'm not currently at that job. And then what else was I doing? So then I've got a part-time job teaching 2 music appreciation courses for like a state college in Western Kansas. But you know, freelancing is part of what I do. I don't want to depend on that for 100% of my income, but it's a big part of what I do. And that's what was really decimated by COVID. Or I should say not by COVID, but by COVID restrictions. And by I want to make that distinction because it's not the virus that killed our industry. It's the restrictions that were put on us. You know, they're very important.
The restrictions, and I always say, and also the companies and the people that obeyed to those and submitted to those restrictions.
That's right. The people that the businesses that complied and the organizations that said we're afraid of liability. That's what's killing the industry, not the virus. The virus is killing less than 1% of people, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, circling back to your original question, at the time I was subbing with all these different orchestras. And one of them that I don't want to call out specifically because I don't want to talk badly about the management or about the orchestra committee or anything like that. One of the orchestras that I went to go play with said, if you're coming from out of town, you need to take a serology test when you get to town. So I showed up and I got a finger prick. And I'm sitting there with like my finger bleeding and I'm going, this can't be good when I'm about to play 2 hours from now. Like that seems a little invasive and unnecessary, right? But they did that for all the out of town players. I should have looked up serology. I didn't know. I thought it was going to be like a nasal swab or something, right? So I mean,
I was like, what is that? Finger?
Yeah, I was like, a finger prick? Are you kidding? So I did that, and then I get to rehearsal, and the orchestra personnel manager gets up on the podium and he says, "Okay, guys, I know this is the first time for some of you that you've played a gig since all of this started. So let me just run through the list." And he like he undoes like a scroll that's this
wow.
And he's like, let me go through all the rules and restrictions that we have to abide by. So we're sitting there and I can definitively say that weekend we spent more time worrying about abiding by the regulations than we did actually working on the music. So it was terrible. I mean, it was.
Who made these regulations and like how strict were they in enforcing them?
Great question. So the first rehearsal, I sat there in my chair stewing, absolutely furious. And I just went, should I just walk out? Should I just not play this gig? I mean, it's impossible to communicate with anybody in my section. It's impossible to hear what the conductor is saying. The conductor probably can't hear me because we're all separated by 6 feet. So normally you have a stand partner in classical orchestra, right? You have a stand partner who's doing the marking and the page turning for you. So we didn't have any of that. So everybody would have to drop their instrument, their music, and turn the page at the same time. And you had like whole sections of the music drop out of the texture. I mean, it was a joke. It was like, it's impossible to play in these conditions, right? The mask made it really impossible to communicate with anybody who's ever played orchestra, any kind of ensemble, jazz ensemble, rock band, whatever. You're constantly communicating with visual cues and with whispered whatever with the other people around you. None of that. We're all wearing masks. We can't communicate. So the whole thing was just such a joke. I sat there stewing and I did start thinking to myself, okay, who should I be upset with? Because I don't want to take this out on the personnel manager if he's not the one who put it in place. I don't want to complain to the board if they're not the one, So I never got a definitive answer to that, but I believe that it was a combination of the symphony management. So like the president and the board, but then also there's a players committee who again complied with the rules. I mean, the players could have been like, this is unsustainable and we can't do this. And they didn't. They went, oh yeah, we don't want to get in trouble. And it ruined the concert. So in case people are just going, well, she's just complaining about something and the concert turned out fine. It didn't. The concert was canceled. It was canceled because we did all this work and then we're out on a stage in the middle of a baseball stadium, one of those big things that you set up with the clunky like metal framework. I don't know the terminology for it, but so we're out in the middle of the baseball stadium in 25-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh wow.
With music stands and sheet music being whipped everywhere and even some people's instruments going flying, and they said, well, we're going to give it a shot. And then it started raining. So
what a nightmare.
So it's pouring rain on this stage setup. And the personnel manager came out and he said, okay, just to us privately, he was like, there are people who showed up to this concert. There's people out on the lawn, like huddled in blankets and rain jackets and umbrellas. And he's like, there are people that showed up to see this show. We need to try to give them a show. Will you guys maybe just play the Mozart overture and then we can call it? We're like, yeah, I guess. So with frozen fingers and numb lips, everybody takes their instruments and we get through a 6-minute Mozart overture. And then we were like, out. That's it. We're done. So here's the thing. It's not the virus that made us play outside. It's the restrictions and it's the protocol that the orchestra felt they had to follow. And it's the musicians going along with it. That's what the concert. It's not the virus.
Right.
I just like to make that distinction because people go, oh yeah, COVID ruined a lot of things. I was like, didn't ruin this. That was decisions that people made. That's what ruined this.
Crazy about that too, like with an orchestra. I mean, like you said, you want that energy. You want to be able to communicate with people. You want to be able to hear. Like, I don't know if like half of the section is way over there. I mean, everybody's distanced by 6 feet. I don't know how big these orchestras were, but like it's probably gonna be hard to hear even certain sections while you're playing. Which is, what does it even sound like to the audience? And I don't know if orchestras ever do this, but it almost seems impossible. Like if everyone like wore in-ear monitors, but are there even monitor consoles that have 40, 50, 60 channels of different in-ear monitors? It doesn't sound like it could work doing it outdoors.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. There's some situations where we would do that. For example, when an orchestra is backing like a rock band, and so they're plugged in, and so we have to be plugged in, or we've got the click track in our ear or something like that.
Right.
Not this time. I mean, this is an acoustic, we're playing Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Bruch. I mean, we're playing a bunch of dead white guys from Europe, and they didn't have that kind of technology back then. And so we try to replicate that and be authentic. And an orchestra doesn't want to go electronic unless they have to. So in that scenario, I think it would have so you're right, that is technology that we have and can take advantage of. But in this particular situation, it was already gone to hell. I mean, the whole situation was a joke to begin with. Like, is that really going to fix it? I don't think so.
Right.
So that was the original scenario that happened. And after that, I made the decision to just go, yeah, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I'm not playing in orchestras currently.
Is the orchestra still happening, or are you and you're not playing, or have they also canceled? And
no, they're still going. They're still going. Out of the 3, I would say 4, out of the 4 orchestras that I was either full-time or subbing with, and they're all regional orchestras. So full-time meaning like, 6 or 8 concerts a year. We take a week to perform, and then there's like a 2-week break, and then we perform again, kind of a thing. So not full-time as in 40 hours a week. Out of those 4 orchestras, 3 of them are still playing. One of them just got started again. The other 2 are playing, but with all of that protocol in place. And the 4th just never got started again. So I don't know what is going to happen to them. But the one, the guy was like, I'm sorry, we're trying to get our contracts back going. And I hope they all join us for the March concert. And I thought long and hard about it. I mean, I seriously did consider it for a long time. And finally, I wrote him an email and I said, I have decided to step back from concerts with these restrictions. I hope you understand. I hope there's still a place for me next year, but I won't be joining you this year. And he was like, nope, I get it. So it really is destroying not just the industry and not just the opportunity for live performance with a symphony, but also the morale of musicians. I mean, I was just crushed and I was like, I'm not dealing with this. So I'm pursuing other avenues and I'm happier.
Were there other musicians that felt similar to the way you felt and also decided not to play with those orchestras anymore?
Well, I'm pretty outspoken and I really don't care what people think. So I made my voice heard as I usually do, and kind of didn't care what people thought. I just kind of stepped back and was like, I'm out. If y'all want to know why I'm making this decision, feel free to talk to me, but I'm not going to stand for this. There were other people who didn't like it, but complied, which is what we do with so much of the population now. I mean, there's business owners that don't like it and want to fight it, but they either don't have the courage, which, it takes a lot. So I'm not blaming them, but there's either people who just don't have it in them to fight back, or they're just really afraid of the consequences. I will say that there was one flute player who sat behind me and he was like, I've got anxiety. I don't have time for this. I'm leaving. And so we kind of fed on each other's strength and we're like, yeah, I think I'm out too. And it really helped knowing that I'm not the only one that's calling BS on this. I mean, there's other people that up. It's just a matter of who decides to actually stand up and say something about it, because not everybody will.
Right. That's awesome that you spoke up and you're being a voice for musicians, and hopefully like people like you are giving courage to musicians to speak up, because I feel like a lot of people are worried just because like I don't know what if you surveyed the music industry, like where people would stand politically. I just have an assumption, and I have an assumption they would probably very heavily lean like liberal or progressive, like a giant percentage of the industry. So it's scary to speak up, right? Because if 70 to 90% of the industry is all of a sudden going to alienate you for speaking up, then you just want to be silenced. So it's awesome that people like you are starting to speak up and be a voice for hopefully other musicians to have the courage to speak up as well.
Yeah, that's totally true. I have two thoughts on that. One
Mhm.
is, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, somebody's got to say something. But going back to what I said about diversifying your career, if
Yeah.
this were my only job, I wouldn't have the luxury to say that
Yeah.
because I would be in danger of losing my livelihood, right? But
Right.
instead, I went, I'm going to work a few hours here, a few hours there, and then pick up this part-time job and maybe take this gig. And so then when the time came that I decided to drop a gig, I was able to do that. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important for any, not just classical musicians, anybody
Yeah.
recording
All industries.
all industries, but especially in music, which is a lot of times such a gig economy.
Mhm.
It's so important to pick up more than one job, have a side hustle, have 3 side hustles,
Right.
divide your time equally or whatever you want to do, because then that way, if there's something that doesn't align with either your principles, which like me, it was a big deal for me to say, I don't stand for this, or if you just don't want to take a gig and you don't want to be obligated to do that for the income, then you have the freedom to do that. So
Yeah.
that's why I preach that, not only to my students, but to other people in the industry for sure. And
Right.
then I had another funny comment when you said something about the rock industry and touring. Somebody made the comment a few months ago, and it always stuck with me. They were like, rock and punk musicians are supposed to be the rebels, and they're the
No.
ones that are folding.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Like
What
they're
happened
the
to
ones
rock and roll and punk rock? Stick it to the man. Like here's the man really coming down on you right now, and you're just tapping out.
you're rolling over and taking it, bro. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be speaking out. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really sad. So classical musicians are a little more subtle about that stuff. I mean, they're a little more understated and they're a little more like, well, I'm just grateful to have a job and that kind of thing. But if I were a rock musician, I would, or especially like, punk rock or like whatever, I would be waving my flag. I would be on all the socials. Like I would be yelling about it because that's part of the culture, right? It should be.
Yeah. Maybe that's why rock and roll is dead, because rock and roll musicians are not fighting the system anymore. They're just making cookie cutter rock music. I don't know. I hope it comes back because I'm a big rock fan. I just have the Metallica poster in the back and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm talking a lot about the classical industry, but for you, I mean, I don't know if you've spoken about this in previous podcasts, but I'm curious, like, what's the biggest way that you've seen the impact with you and your colleagues and where you work?
Mhm. So I'm actually starting to speak up more about it as well. And we talked about Shane Hazel earlier, before we started recording. He kind of gave me the courage to start speaking up more. And I've actually sent him some of the tweets I'm starting to post. I'm like, I'm here's some liberty tweets for the music industry. And my big thing is so the industry completely shut down. And I am frustrated that like at first we didn't know what this was, right? So at first, people were panicked, they were freaked out. Is this going to kill half the population of the world? Nobody really knew like what was going to happen. So I understand in the beginning to take maybe some extreme precautions, even though I feel like they jump to conclusions too fast and make some really bad decisions really fast. I understand the panic in the beginning, but after even given a month, I was going to say 2 weeks, but after a month, like then what? Like you're going to keep allowing things to be shut down and your industry to be completely destroyed. And it was crazy to see in other countries that they're doing experiments. Like it was in Norway where they did the first driveway show, and then they did a massive EDM driveway show or drive-in show, and in Germany, and then in Germany they started doing experimenting with these pods, and they built these pods in arenas, and they started doing socially distanced arena shows, and now they're even doing shows with full capacity audiences with a few like restrictions. You have to wear a mask. There's sanitization stations everywhere, and then they kind of worked with the ventilation system of the arena, and the way they built the ventilation system really helped reduce the spread of the virus at that arena. And I believe they said there's actually no cases that came from that full like arena concert. And um and they're still like trying to do other studies similar to see if it's actually like, if it was just a one-time freak occurrence based on the audience that came, or if it's an actually like thing we could do, like just take some precautions, have concerts, and work on the ventilation system of the arena. So I love that they're doing stuff over there, where I feel like here the main companies, like Live Nation and AEG, I call them out, so I'll call them out here. I feel like they just completely folded and submitted. And a friend of mine literally this week got laid off from Live Nation, and it's like you've already went through 8 months keeping them on salary and keeping on staff. Like, why now all of a sudden when there's a vaccine, right, and more people have been affected and we're getting closer to herd immunity, why are you laying people off now when we've already kept them on for 8 months? So it's just very frustrating to see what the bigger companies did in our industry, because they're control most of the content. I mean, they're doing thousands of shows a year. You take all of those shows off the calendar from venues, and now people are not working. They're not providing for their families. Artists aren't working. And when I was bashing the agencies in the beginning too, because the agencies were kind of doing the same thing. They laid off all their people. They stopped touring their artists. But now some of them are also starting to experiment, at least in like Texas and Florida, the states that are open. And so that's nice to see and encouraging to see, but it's still not the big companies doing it. It's all the little ones in the indies. So I hope once this is over, we're on the other side of this, that whatever that looks like, I hope that the indies become more united and stay stronger, and then they start getting some more to shows. So like, when there's an arena tour, it's not Live Nation presents or AEG presents. I hope it's some indie promoter presents, or maybe there's several indie promoters promoting a tour, and like, each promoter does just a region or something. I'd love to see that kind of a change in the industry.
That's cool. That's a really neat perspective. I like that.
Mhm.
That's because you're able to be optimistic about it and say maybe this is pivoting and giving more opportunities to people and companies and organizations that didn't have it before. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's oh man, that's great. But you're absolutely right. Like, what is the end game here? We have not been given any definitive. 15 days to flatten the curve was a complete joke. We knew that when they said it. But after the 15 days, and then they went, well, just another month. Well, maybe just until the summer. And still everybody was saying like, oh man, I can't wait till the summer. The spring has been so terrible. We are now in December. What is happening?
Yeah.
What is happening? This has been
still no end in sight.
And there's still no end in sight. And people go, well, until the vaccine, until the vaccine, until the vaccine. And it's like, if you had said that back in March and you had said until the vaccine, that would have at least given us something. But they weren't, it's like,
Mhm.
I have other thoughts about the vaccine, but that's neither here nor there. But
same.
yeah. But it's just like, for our industry, and actually for any industry, if people want to stay afloat, you've got to learn to weather the storm. This is the biggest storm that a lot of us are going to encounter, right? I mean, especially people who are freelancers or work in an industry that is already so volatile. Are you kidding? It's already hard to be a musician or be in the music industry. And then we encounter something like this, and it's like, it's making and breaking a lot of people, a lot of people. And the ones that are making are doing something different than they have been, because that's what they have to survive.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at different things now too. Luckily I had a side hustle too. I was teaching, as an adjunct professor, but that's, an adjunct, you get paid per class. It's not a full-time year-round thing. So I'm literally looking at a completely different career paths, because or I would, maybe just try to build an artist management business and just manage artists. But doing concerts right now, it doesn't seem very promising. Like, and the crazy thing too is like, putting stagehand or audio engineer or lighting designer, like putting those job titles that are in the music industry on your resume, that doesn't translate to retail. It doesn't translate to sales. Like, it doesn't translate to a lot of these different other industries, even though those people are probably more than qualified to do those jobs. But because their resume doesn't say that, they're not going to get those jobs, because other people with experience in those industries are going to get those jobs first. So it's like, we're like screwed twice.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We've always been kind of that. It's like, if you're talking about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or however you want to think about the human condition, you need food, shelter, clothing, water. And then you can start thinking about, okay, well then human connection, you want to have a social connection, and you want to maybe get married, have a family, or whatever. And then on top of that is like, okay, we are financially secure, our family is safe. Hey, we should go to a concert, right? So that's the last thing that anybody thinks about in terms of necessities in their life is entertainment. That's always the very top of any hierarchy like that. It's the smallest bit. So if you want to make a living in this industry, in any music, I mean, music is music, doesn't matter if it's classical or audio production, whatever. If you want to make a living, you got to be smart. You got to be quick. You have to diversify your talents.
Yeah.
But also, you've got to be ready for things like this. And this is just going to show us that a lot of us weren't prepared for something huge. Yeah. So they talk about, well, it's so unprecedented. And it better be unprecedented. I mean, this is ridiculous. We better not encounter this again.
Yeah.
This is killing. And so the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking just a minute ago is like, you and I work in music, and a lot of us work in music. What about music for the people who don't? What about music for somebody who's in retail or an engineer or something, and they go, I have a little extra spending money. I'd like to go see a show. Where are you going to go see a show?
Yeah.
There's nothing to see right now.
Right.
So music, not just as an industry or a business, but in a general sense of music existing, is suffering right now. Yeah. And one of the things that I've been speaking out against is the normalization of virtual shows as replacing live shows. Right. I have all the respect in the world for people who are able to pivot with their talents and with their abilities and go, hey, I'm going to live stream, or I'm going to, how they do the, where they'll piece together, they'll go like, well, we're going to have a singer record, and then a drummer, and then a keyboard player and a guitarist, and then put it all together and create it. That's not real. That's not real. I respect what they're doing, but that, if you try to tell me that that's a replacement, I will not accept it. If you try to say, hey, here's the cool project that we're doing, I thought you guys on Instagram might like to see, or whatever, great, go for it. But don't tell me that my industry is going to be replaced with a screen, because I will not accept that,
And it never will. Even before COVID started, people were already talking about, virtual reality shows and things like that. And this just wasn't working back then. And I don't think it ever will, because there's, when it comes to human connection, what is it? It's like the stages of intimacy, and I think there's 9 stages, right? And that relates to not just like romantic relationships, it relates to all relationships. Like even sales people learn about the stages of intimacy. And if you're seeing someone on a screen, the max you can get is like, I see you, you see me, and we're talking. That's it. 3 stages. And that's not going to build like real connections and relationships with people. And, going to shows was an outlet for people. It was a release. It was a way to come together with people from different walks of life. It was create, memories. Going to shows, it's a place to laugh and have fun and let loose. And people could probably really use some shows right now, seeing like the mental health effects of all this.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that music is so much more than just notes. I mean, it really is the essence of life for a lot of people, and that's being just the way. So, so depressing.
Yeah. and it's so good that you're talking about, diversifying your income and doing other things, because I feel like in all industries it's important, but I feel like especially in the music industry, because I always felt it was, even like, the non-musician side, like the promoter and venue side, I always thought it was dangerous that their entire business model, their entire income stream relies on live events. And if there's no live events, then the venue can't make any more money. And if that's the only revenue stream they have, always thought that was a very horrible and dangerous business model, because what happens to live events go away, and nobody ever thought they would. And here we are.
Yep. Isn't that crazy to think a year ago, if you had told, I think this all the time now, because now it's been a better part of a year. And I'm constantly saying, like, what would someone have said if you had just snapshotted what's going on right now and showed it to somebody in February of 2020? They would not have believed you. They would be like, are you kidding? But it has happened so gradually, and people have been so increasingly accepting of it. And that's the depressing part, is that people are not standing up against it. It's not, and people are, they're being silenced, and they're being canceled, and they're afraid because of liability issues and whatever. But the people who are just permissive of all of this that's the dangerous part to me.
Yeah.
And if you want to, if you want to see your friends and neighbors and maybe your kids or whoever, if you want to see them with fewer job opportunities, keep the lockdowns coming.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, like talking about the lockdowns, like, because if you're going to lock down, that's the decision that the federal government makes, then at least they should have a plan for the people that have lost their income. And I mean, I'm not for having, universal based income, but maybe you have to have that if you're going to tell me I can't work, I can't provide for my family, I can't feed my family. So you have to have a place, like a plan in place at least. Like again, like I'm totally against bailouts and universal basic income, but if I can't work and I can't provide for my family, I still got to pay rent. Like at some point, unemployment runs out, and a one-time $1,200 stimulus check is doesn't do the trick. And I'd rather not have bailouts, as I mentioned. I'd rather just things be open. But yeah, you can't just shut things down and think people are going to be okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is, we're kind of getting into political territory. This is juicy.
Yeah.
I actually have a theory that, you know, it seems like every few weeks or even sometimes every few days, you'll see something on the news that's like, Republicans and Democrats are fighting over the proposed new stimulus plan. I have a theory that there never was any new stimulus plan. They did one and done. They knew it was going to be that way. I don't think there was ever a plan of having a second one. And I think they're saying that to string us along, and get people happier with the idea of, well, maybe this is just the way it's going to be. Maybe it's the new normal. If I hear that one more time, I string us along. It's not the new normal. It's worse. It's messed up. This should not be the new normal. Yeah. Don't accept it.
Right. And the newest bill doesn't even have a stimulus plan in it. It's just $900 billion in bailouts. So at least they're showing their cards now. At least they're like showing the public what they really always wanted to do, that they don't give a shit about us.
Yeah.
But it's just so disappointing watching all that.
But you're right. I mean, don't lock us down and then say, also, there's no alternative for you. We're just locking down. That's it. There's no end game. We're going to keep moving the goalposts. So you're never going to find out when this is going to end. You just have to be strung along and strung along and strung along. And that's what's been happening for months. And some of us were over it in April. So
yeah.
Oh, it's just so frustrating.
But since we're talking about this, I know we're gonna probably get some pushback, right? So what I want to kind of talk about too is like the kind of pushback you're getting, and I mean that I'm getting, like, you know, when I post stuff like this, like lockdowns don't work, lockdowns kill too. Then people say, oh, you don't care about life, and you don't care about the 200,000 people that have died. And we're not saying that. Like, we're not saying that we're these beasts and these animals and we want everyone to die and get sick. We don't want that. But people jump to those conclusions immediately. Like, have you seen similar response and pushback?
Yeah, I've got a ton of pushback. It's funny, you mentioned at the very beginning, you were saying one of your, I forget how you said it, your libertarian spam account. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Like, we all have these kind of, like, we have our account that's like, hi, it's me, and I'm neutral and fun. And then we also have this kind of like insidious little, this is me, my libertarian account where I'm going to fight with people, but I'm not going to put my name up, right? Yeah. I actually have two of those. So I have me on Instagram, and then I have two other Liberty accounts where I just argue people all day. And so I get tons and tons of pushback. I mean, tons all the time in person from my own friends, some of whom have been alienated, and that's okay. If you're going to be alienated from me on the basis of your principles, maybe we shouldn't be friends anyway. It's kind of how I feel about it. Right. Not that I'm pushing you away, but if you are pushed away by what I think, maybe you should reconsider what our friendship means to you. You know what I mean? So yeah. I've gotten pushback in person. I've gotten pushback online. And I've certainly got pushback in my industry because I'm one of the very few musicians who is willing to say that lockdowns are bogus and they need to stop. Mm-hmm. So when people give me the line of, you don't care about the 200, what is it now?
280 something, 85, 87. Like
that, right? So let's say it's 300. Let's say by the time somebody listens to this podcast, it's 300, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, and this is a side note, but we know a lot of those numbers are fake. We know that is not somebody dropping dead of COVID. Okay. First of all, there's comorbidities, there's all kinds of stuff. The numbers are inflated. But let's say, for the purpose of argument, let's say it's 300,000 lives in is that worldwide or is that in the US?
In the US.
I want to say that's nationally. Yeah. Let's say it's 300,000 lives in the US that have been lost to COVID. My response to that is, if you don't think I care about those lives, I want you to answer for the other lives that have been decimated as a result of your policies that you support. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to say we need to lock down to save 300,000 lives or 300,000 more lives, however they want to say it, okay, answer for me the suicides, answer me the people whose careers and livelihoods and families are suffering as a result of the lockdowns. Answer me, think about the supply chain of the United States, how we get the food to other countries and the food and the aid and everything else. somebody, I don't remember if it was Tom Woods or somebody was talking about the US is so internally focused right now that
Mhm.
we're not thinking about all of what we do for other countries and what
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
provide. And
Mhm.
some estimate that like 150 million Africans will be dead by the end of by whenever the end is, whenever that is.
Right.
So you're worried about 200,000 or 300,000 Americans. You need to be thinking about the other
Right.
lives that are being, if not lost, then destroyed by
Mhm.
these policies that you support.
Yeah.
That's my answer to that. It's really simple. I'll answer for the COVID lies if you answer for the rest, and it's a lot more. It's a
Yeah.
lot more than 300,000.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I heard this morning on, I think it was Megan Kelly's podcast. We're talking about like lockdowns and the dangers of the lockdowns. And I think is it 80 to 120 million people are going to die from starvation because they don't have the resources anymore that we, like you said, that we're sending to those countries and things that we provide for those countries. So yeah, one
It's
answer for those lives. And then two is like, why isn't there a ticker on CNN, or hasn't there ever been a ticker on CNN, those news outlets, for cancer deaths and for heart disease deaths? Because this year already, both of those have far surpassed COVID deaths. Like they're triple of what,
yeah.
how many people died from COVID. Why aren't you outraged about that? Like if you're so
No, there's not a ticker. There's not a ticker because that would be a balanced viewpoint, and CNN has never been and never will be a balanced viewpoint.
right,
CNN, MSNBC, I mean, these major news networks make their business on alarming people and on fear. And if they start to say things like, "Well, here's the other side," then they lose their fearful base and their people tuning in to hear the latest alarmist news, and then they don't have a business. So that's why they're
yeah. And it's not just about like the suicide rates, right now during COVID. Like how many more lives we're gonna lose to suicide in the future because of what the lockdowns did to them. Like if someone lost their entire business, like their entire life savings, and this now has put them into a real big like depression because they can't provide for their families. Now, you know, not saying everyone's going to do this, but let's say now they tried, they go to substance abuse and develop an addiction, and then, you know, sure, I mean, a year from now, the lockdowns might be done, all the restrictions are done, but they're still suffering from what this did right now, and maybe they commit suicide a year from now. Like, it's awful. What is this doing to others? Like, we're not having those conversations on a mainstream level, and because all they want to talk about is COVID and COVID deaths and Donald Trump.
yeah, and Donald Trump, yeah. The long range effects from the collateral damage of COVID is
Mhm.
something that's not being given enough airtime and enough.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean that's absolutely something that I'm talking about. You don't need to be a libertarian to see that.
Yeah.
And you don't need source material, and you don't need references, and you don't need science or any of this other jargon that they're throwing at us. This is not about that. It's about
Mhm.
looking around at your community, at the people that you spend time with. Go down to the main street of your town and see how many businesses are either closed or out of work, or how many people they've laid off. It's the evidence is right around you. So I don't
Right.
need case studies. I don't need Johns Hopkins to do any kind of, it's like it's right there in front of my nose. I'm seeing this.
Right.
So another thing that I'm speaking out against is being very vehemently anti-lockdown. I mean, very, very, very
Yeah.
much. Not
Same.
anti-vaccine, not anti-mask. Those are two separate issues.
Right.
But I'm fervently anti-lockdown.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
just because we say we're against lockdowns doesn't mean we're against all the other stuff. We're just very passionate about against lockdowns.
Right. So another angle, and we kind of talked about this. I mean, so you've got Tourette's, I've got an autoimmune disease. I mean,
Mhm.
we're health-focused individuals.
Right.
When this all started, I mean, it's just so silly. There were people going, like the CDC would go, "Hey guys, did you know you have to wash your hands now?"
Yeah. You didn't wash your hands before?
I'm like, hold on, wait, didn't we learn this in like second grade? Like,
Yeah.
why is the CDC? So then they were like, well, no, you have to wash your hands, but you also should wear a mask on the plane. Okay, I was doing that before, it was cool. I have a
Mhm.
brief issue with vasculitis, and so when I get on a plane where there's a bunch of people in a small space, I put a mask on to fly. I always have, probably always will. Maybe not every time, but
Right.
especially if I have been sick or if the person next to me is coughing. I mean, good God, I'm gonna put a mask on, but
Yeah.
but like they're starting to tell us these things that are routine things that autoimmune disease patients or anybody who's been sick or is knowledgeable or conscientious about their health are already doing. So
Mhm.
they're giving us these guidelines, and the only people that are freaking out about this are the people who've been healthy their entire lives.
Right.
So then they're looking at me and they're going, well, you don't care about the immunocompromised. I'm like, surprise, bitch, I am one.
Right.
That's when it
And you're
really,
still against lockdowns.
yep. And so that's when it really changes the conversation is I go, guess what? I am the individual that you purport to be protecting. And I'm against this. It doesn't benefit me. I most likely had COVID back in March and I recovered, as did probably my husband and a couple of other friends that we knew. We were like, gosh, this flu is just really hitting us hard. And then 2 weeks later, oh, there's coronavirus. And we were like, oh, I think I had that.
Yeah.
So even somebody who's severely immunocompromised, I mean, I take pills every single day to lower my immune system so I can't fight off disease. Someone who is severely immunocompromised, who is in the high risk category, is telling you to your face, don't wear a mask on my account. Don't ruin your business or go out of work on my account. I can take care of myself. It's my job to take care of my health, not yours, not the business down the street, and certainly not the government.
Yeah.
Full stop.
And what's awesome about that is you're speaking up for one of those voices, right? Because there's so many people that are speaking up for the immunocompromised, and it's like, but they don't have anyone, or they don't deal with the conditions, or they don't know anyone that's dealing with that. But they're speaking for those people. It's like they can speak for themselves. Like,
don't tell me about that. You don't know me. You don't know me. I've been with this for 16 years. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty nuts. I mean, I can't represent or speak for the elderly, but they tend to lump us together, right? Like the elderly and the immunocompromised. So anybody who's at risk. Okay, well, that's me.
Right.
That's
I mean,
me.
even they're speaking up. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see those, those pictures when they're like have the signs out on the road and saying, I'd rather die from COVID than loneliness. Like it's first time I saw it, I was like, I started crying. It's
bad. It's pretty bad. I had lunch with my great aunt yesterday, and she broke down and said, I haven't seen my grandkids in months.
Wow.
Their parents won't let me see them because I'm older and they are trying to protect me. And what I'm trying to tell them is, don't worry about me. I can handle myself. I want to see my grandbabies.
Yeah.
And her kids won't let her do that. So, and the other thing, this time of year, typically I work with my studio I have always between about 10 and 15 private students, violin and viola. And I take them to nursing homes and we play for the residents and we get all dressed up on our Santa hats and our Christmas earrings or leggings or whatever. And the boys wear like red and green ties and we go out and we play Christmas carols for the nursing home residents. And about October, I went, that's probably not going to happen this year. And so those people who every year are used to having us over and they get to hear Christmas carols and these people probably never leave that nursing home. I mean, some of them are really, really not doing well and they're there probably as hospice, or kind of a situation. And they're not going to have any live music this year. So if I believe that if a 95-year-old man with breathing problems says to the management of his building, hey, I'd like to have musicians come in and play for me, he has the right to do that. Right. If they then say, well, to be in our facility you have to wear a mask, fine. To be in our facility you have to stand 6 feet apart, fine. But don't tell me masks and 6 feet apart and hand sanitizer and quarantine, and then we're still not allowed to do these things. Like, at what point is enough enough?
And imagine like the impact that would have on just like their mental health and well-being if you were able to come in there, right? Especially right now during the holidays, after a year like this, to go play for them. There's got to be ways to do it safely. They could be on one side of a hall and you guys come in and you're on the other side. You never even cross over to the other side, but you still get to play for them and they still get to hear y'all play. Man, that's so heartbreaking for them.
Yeah, I was thinking but we've done this before and I'm not going up and, I'm not like sitting in the laps of the residents or anything. Yeah. I mean, we're on this kind of little stage in the auditorium and they're in their chairs. Like we're not even close to them, but they're just the facility is so nervous about contact tracing and all this other stuff. They're so nervous that they're going to be liable for a COVID death. That's it, and the whole line of if it saves even one life, I want to be like, okay, but the collateral damage is that you're ruining 18 other lives. So let's think about what you're doing with your policies and with your absolutely destructive protocol, so.
And you brought up the like health. So one thing I wish we would have talked about this entire time more about, right? Like you can't become super healthy in 2 weeks. Like if we're doing a 2-week hard lockdown right in the beginning of March, all right, cool. It is what it is. Like we don't need to talk about health. But now 9 months in, imagine if the news constantly posted content about how to strengthen your immune system, how to become healthier. And it's not just about diet and exercise. It's about getting enough sleep. It's about getting sunshine. It's about having social interaction. It's good for your immune system. Like talking about the things that are good are going to make you healthier and stronger, because the best offense is a strong defense, I always say. And if you have a strong immune system and you get this virus, I mean, it's already been shown a strong immune system will very, very likely, it's probably even higher than 99.95%, which is what the survival rate is. Like probably even higher than that if we as a society were just like healthier and we're more conscious about health. And it doesn't mean everyone needs to go on these super crazy restrictive diets all of a sudden, because there's so much more to health than just what you eat and put in your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically what you're describing is being a well-balanced, healthy human.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And that's what,
if there's these people who are telling me, you need to do X so that I'm healthy. Well, I could just as easily turn that on them and I could say, you need to not do X so that I can have Y, or so that I can be healthy or whatever. I mean, it's so incredibly hypocritical, because they go, this is the most hypocritical statement out there right now, is they'll go, you're selfish for not caring about other people. And I go, you're selfish for telling me what to do for your comfort and for your safety.
mm-hmm.
Because if you believe that you are at risk for this thing, or at higher risk or whatever, that's on you to protect yourself. That's on you. I'm not going to shut down what I do for a living. I'm not going to keep my family home. I'm not going to stop going for walks around the block with my dog for your comfort. That's just absolutely ludicrous for you to tell me that kind of thing. So I turn it back on people and I go, okay, define selfish, because that's what I see being right now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just terrible.
So true. So going back a little bit, so rewinding to diversifying your revenue streams. A question I had is, because you said there's two different routes when you go the orchestra route, right? And one of them is playing for the orchestra and being part of a symphony. I meant to ask you this earlier, so this sounds like a little of a weird tangent, but when I used to do shows for AEG, there's sometimes when artists would come through that need like backing musicians, like could be either just a horn section for like the Temptations, or we're doing Weird Al Yankovic and he wants a 30-piece orchestra, and we would hire this company. What was the guy's name? Ted Turley or Greg Turley or something like that. But he was a musician that had a company that you could hire musicians from. So we just tell him what you would need. I need 4 violinists and blah, 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 this and this and this, and then he would provide it. Are those the types of gigs that you were doing too, or how does someone do those types of gigs?
Yeah, totally. So actually right before the pandemic, I got to play with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra when they came to town, which was like
fun.
It was killer, man. It was probably the coolest gig I've ever played.
That's awesome.
And those kind of things. So the guy that you're describing, he sounds like he was probably a contractor, like a local like independent contractor or a booking agent or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have those contacts also. Like in Kansas City, there's a woman who lives not far from me, and she has the connections to the venues, and the venues have their booking agents like her, who will say, just like you said, we need 4 violins and 2 violas and a cellist for this gig when they come to town. And so yeah, last December TSO came, and I got the call, and I was really pumped because the winter prior, one of my friends had played with them, and I was like, oh, I'm so jealous. Because I remembered that I said that, and he called me right away and was like, hey, do you want the gig? I was like, yes, I do.
Yes.
So I got to play with TSO, and it was a blast. And I mean, nothing like most of your career being Mozart, and then all of a sudden you come up and there's like a 12-foot column of fire like moving up and like singeing your eyebrows, you know, like that was really, really awesome gig. So yeah, there's people who are go-betweens, there's people who are contractors or booking agents or whatever. And that is one of those situations that I don't know how it works kind of like in your area or in your industry, but here at least, or in the Midwest, it's kind of like the more you network, you will eventually meet those people. So the what you know paradigm, it's not, a lot of times that's interpreted as nepotism or like unfair treatment or well, you know this person, and so you were able to kind of work them and then and work your way to the top. And that's not true. Who you know implies you have spent you've put in the time, you've made the social connections, and you've networked with the right people. And eventually my friend Eric talks to his friend Kathy, who's the booker for TSO, and then I get the gig. So it's not like I was schmoozing all over town and working the room or anything like that. I didn't have to do that. I mean, just by nature of being in the career that I'm in and playing with the people I play with, you forge those connections, and you eventually get those gigs. And so, I mean, unfortunately, Trans-Siberian just announced they're not playing this year. So
I know.
no, I don't think we can do it again. And then they announced some virtual thing, and I was like, oh, come on.
Virtual shows.
I was like, that's so not the same. But
what was that experience like in terms of preparing for it? Like, did you get the music in it? Hey, look at that. Little cameo. How was it in terms of like preparing for it? Do you get the music in advance? Do you kind of just like get everything there day of?
It's so at the point at which we actually showed up to play the gig, they were like, okay, here's your music. We're gonna have like a half-hour rehearsal, and then we'll get on stage in 2 hours. And we were like, huh? I mean, it really does happen that fast. So that's where it's like, wow, you must have spent weeks preparing. No, bro. Like, I went to music school to sharpen my sight reading skills and to improve my technique so that when I get in a situation where I am virtually sight reading, I'm able to do that. We had, when the orchestra came to town, they play, they move so quickly. I mean, they're in the bus in the morning, they get to a venue at night, they finish the 3-hour show, everybody gets back on the bus, they drive through the night, and then they play another gig the following afternoon, and then probably another one that night. So they move so quickly. There is no time to sit down with the local string players and go, okay, this is our tempo, and this is our... So technically we had a rehearsal, but it was 30 minutes of being like, yeah, okay, does this look okay to you guys? Okay, cool. Now let's go to this page. I mean, it was so perfunctory. Like, there, we had a rehearsal. Okay, now we got to go play. Yeah. So it happened so fast. And so I played in the Kansas City and the Wichita. There was all shows in St. Louis, but the union kind of hijacked that one and said, no, we need our own players. And so we kind of got booted from that one. But Kansas City and Wichita, I got to play with them. And so we got my friend Eric and I and another violinist that we were playing with, got in the car, we packed our bags, we got in the car, and we were away for 24 hours. And it was just like, okay, let's go be rock stars for a day, And so we went to Wichita, and we played the show, and then we went to sleep that night, woke up the next day and played Kansas City. And the experience when you're a classical musician playing Beethoven, and then all of a sudden the curtain goes up and there's like 15,000 screaming fans, that's so different. Like, some people are used to that. We're not. We're used to auditoriums and concert halls that we're lucky to maybe sell a few hundred tickets, right? But I have never experienced that, and that was just such a blast.
So not only was there not a rehearsal or anything, and didn't get the music in advance, but then there's 15,000 people and nerds, right, man?
Curtain goes up, and we're like, okay, let's do this. Let's go for it. It was a really cool experience. Now, I mean, what I'll say about that obviously is it's not like you see a Lindsay Sterling show, for example, and she's singing and dancing and or I guess, I don't know if she sings, but she dances and plays and she's kind of over the stage doing all these different things. And it's not like somebody's putting the mic on us and going, okay, solo.
Right.
I mean, we're very much background music. I mean, there's times you open the whole page and it's completely whole notes. And the whole page is we're just there to provide an atmosphere behind the guitar or whatever. So no, we're not being asked to do incredibly demanding things, but just the whole idea of, okay, show up, wear black, we're going to hook you up to click track. If you don't have any experience with it, oh, well, I guess you're going to learn on stage. Yeah. It happens fast. It happens really fast. And it's exactly as exciting and as glamorous as it sounds. And their caterer that travels with them is like 100% worth the gig.
Oh, nice. Their caterer travels with them. That's cool. There's all different scenarios, right? Because sometimes I've seen artists that will have a caterer on tour with them, and I've seen artists that will just do local catering, or I've seen artists where they might have someone that just like cooks out. Like who was it? It was Revolution. They just brought a guy that like grills, and he sets up a little tent outside and just makes all kinds of cool little unique meals on the grill. It's awesome, all different things you see. And with that too, speaking of seeing different things, right? With having a local orchestra being hired that's not on tour, yeah, sometimes you're get 30 minutes to just kind of look over things. I've seen scenarios where the artist actually does rehearse with the orchestra, like for an hour. I've seen scenarios where the orchestra will do a rehearsal on their own without the band, just going through music, or not at all. I don't know, for Temptations, they kind of just walked in and the production manager kind of gave them a few like notes and had a little chat with them, and that was it.
Yep. That's
So,
that's true a lot of times. I mean, yeah, it a lot of times that's indicative. There was another show I played. This is back when I lived in Ohio. So this was in Youngstown, Ohio, and there was an old this was years and years ago, and I can't remember the band, but you said Temptations. It reminded me. It was like an
yeah.
old style Motown band that was really, really big in like the 70s. And so all these guys are now like in their 70s and 80s, and they're still touring. And so it's a lot of like middle-agers and boomers coming out to these shows because they're like, I saw you when I was 18 and now I'm seeing you. But they needed a backing string quartet. So we got on stage, they put the music in front of us, we played, we got our money, and we left. That was it. Literally no rehearsal. I mean, at least Trans-Siberian had, they were like, okay, there's a back room and our lead violinist is going to come in and kind of go over this stuff with you guys. But there are a lot of times you get no prep. And that's that's why we go to school. That's why we practice. That's what we prepare for. You've got to be a fast sight reader, and you've got to put your game face on and just go, okay, here we go.
Yeah. One of the schools I teach at, the half of my students are part of like the school's music program. So they are going to learn classical music or jazz or vocal performance or those types of majors. And I have some communications and marketing students, but for those students that are the music students, is it as simple as, okay, now you graduate and you finish music school, now you can go play these big gigs, or how do you get to that level where you get those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, so it goes back to networking. At least for me, this is how I've always done it. So I had to do it twice. Once in Ohio, where I grew up and went to school, kind of like Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Akron area. And Akron, I mean, anybody in the business knows Akron is a huge local music scene. That's where Depot is from. That's where the Pretenders got their start. Jaded Era, if anybody's into that kind of stuff. So Akron is really big into the local kind of alternative indie bands. But they also have the talent of the classical musicians that they always pull in for those gigs. So networking comes in handy for those situations, because somebody goes, hey, I need to find a violinist. Where do we look? They're usually going to go to the local school where they know there's a music program. They might look online. I mean, I guess my advice would be put yourself out there in as many avenues as you can. So social media obviously is huge. One of the things I did, not so much in Ohio, but then when I did move to Kansas City, one of the things I did was emailed all of the local high school orchestra directors. And I just, hey, I'm new here in town. I have a private studio. I'm willing to come in and teach a class for you guys. If you have any students that need private lessons, I've got room and I'm happy to take them on. Some people would be a little scared to do that. They'd be like, well, I feel like it's a little intrusive, right? It's not.
You gotta put yourself out there, yeah.
Got to put yourself out there. So, I mean, there's always a delicate balance between putting yourself out there and not being obnoxious about it. I mean, for sure, you don't want to follow up 4 times if the person says, no, we're not interested. Yeah. But I've gotten a lot of leeway from that. And then I don't know. I mean, so it's a lot of emailing, it's social media, it's going and playing the gigs. I mean, a lot of times when you're pushing yourself somewhere new, there's kind of a mantra of never turn down gig.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, whatever the situation is, say yes. Because even if you maybe don't get paid a lot for one, maybe the next one that comes up as a result of that one, you'll get paid more, whatever. So, and yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different in the classical world, but in the end, music is music, and you got to start somewhere. So that's where you're going to start. You're going to have your network and just go for it.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I had Derek Sivers on the podcast. I don't even know if you're familiar with him. He's the founder of City Baby, and he has this philosophy of hell yes or no. So in the beginning, before you get to hell yes or no, you say yes to everything. It doesn't matter if this gig pays $50 and this gig pays $1,000 and anything in between. And until you're overwhelmed with opportunity, you say yes to everything. And then once you're overwhelmed with opportunity, then it's hell yes or no. Like hell yes or no, meaning if someone offers you a gig and you're like, hell yeah, I want to do this. You take it. And if you're like, maybe, then that's a no. But until you don't get there until you're overwhelmed with opportunity, you say yes to everything. And, lots of doors you've probably noticed that lots of doors will open if you say yes to everything. You might play the smallest gig and the smallest gig might provide the best opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, even sometimes, like I said, I moved from Ohio to Kansas City, and I had to in some ways start over, and it very much, I had to humble myself and go, well, this gig is not paying what I'm used to, but I gotta put myself out there. I have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I did get to the point, the first year I lived here, I was very much scrappy, this and that, looking for gigs where I could, and teaching where I could, and going and doing a lot of freebies just to kind of get my name out there, which works. I mean, if you go and you teach a class in a high school and then you get 2 or 3 students out of that, well, it wasn't really free, was it? I mean, it's paying you, it's paying you over and over when those kids come back for private lessons every month. So in a couple of years, I went from that to like, okay, it's December, not so much this year, but we'll use last year as an example. Last December, I got to about November, and I went, okay, I need to figure out how I want my December to go. So like, Trans-Siberian is coming to town. I'm real excited to play with them. Then Christmas Eve, you always want to keep open, because there's always some church somewhere that's going to pay a lot of money to hire a string quartet to play hymns. So it's like the easiest gig for the most amount of money. So you always make sure that Christmas Eve is free. You know, musician families know that we always celebrate on the 26th because we're all working on the 24th and 25th. We all have church jobs. And so you do get to the point where you go, okay, I'm going to have to start being choosy. And at that point, you can then turn around and go, hey, do you want this gig? I can't play it this year. And then you can provide the opportunity for somebody else, which is also pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's how you
pay it forward.
Yeah. Exactly. Paying it forward. And you know, you've really made it when you're like, okay, I have 2 things on the same day, so I'm going to take the better one and then help somebody else out who maybe just getting started, just dipping their toes in the water, and maybe they need that boost. So that feels good too.
When you're networking and reaching out to these schools and these different orchestras, what are you sending them? Are you sending them like links to your social media channels? Are you sending them videos, resume? Like what should people include when they're reaching out?
People, yeah, obviously social media, that's not something I do a lot of, but if you have social media, yes, people like to see you in action. They like to see video and not just a picture of you. So if you have a YouTube, if you have, like I used to do the Facebook Live, not anymore, but if you have anything them too, that's like, this is me actually playing. This is a video of what I sound like. That's very, very valuable. I'm a little bit old school just because of the nature of what I do. It's a little old fashioned. I mean, I teach private lessons in my home. As one main source of income. So when I'm reaching out to these high school orchestra directors, it's basically a flyer. And it's so a picture of me with some kind of cute font, and it says, you know, get your first lesson free, or whatever my hook is, you know.
Right.
You need to learn how to market yourself in so many different areas. So it's not just diversification of work, but it's diversification of marketing ability. So social media, email, make sure your email is set up, make sure you don't have a stupid signature line or make sure your photo on Google looks professional. You know, it's not like your cat or something. So just make sure everything's kind of set up. Have you had any experience with LinkedIn? Is that something you've done?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. What?
Okay.
You have a question about it? Or?
No, I just have never used it, and I haven't found that a lot of musicians do, but maybe I'm in the minority there. I don't know. Have you seen a lot from them?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great place to, because like it's mostly just all professional. Like you're posting gigs, you're finding gigs, you're networking with people in your industry. So I feel like LinkedIn's a great resource. To the most part, people don't get political or post any other stuff. Like it's strictly just for work and finding work. Yeah, to the most part. I actually saw someone post about politics, and then someone commented on it, like, we're posting about politics on LinkedIn now. Because it's like not something you post there. It's not really what it's about. And there's also a lot of resources to, trainings, classes, courses, all kinds of different stuff. But it's all like, it's all focused on learning, networking, and finding jobs to the most part.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's it's something I never got into, but was always kind of curious about. And it's, it's kind of like, how do you balance what you want to be a part of? I mean, 2 years ago, I would have said, okay, I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have YouTube, and it just got so overwhelming. Like, there's a reason that companies hire social media people.
Yeah.
It's social media employees or social media director or whatever. It's because that's a full-time job.
Right. And as a musician, you have to be the marketing director, you have to be your finance director, you have to do all these things.
It's so much. Like, it's so much. And so, for example, for the nonprofit that I was doing for a while, the Violin for Vasculitis. So there was a Facebook page. It wasn't very active because I wasn't very active on it. it got to the point where I was like, okay, so every day I had my checklist. All right, I need to wake up. I need to check my email. I need to check this social media. I need to get on Facebook. I need to do this. I need to update this. And it got so overwhelming that I was actually stressing myself out, and the payout wasn't worth it because I spread so thin on all of these different platforms that it was like, all right, man, I need to, I mean, I talk about diversification, but like that was where I was like, maybe a little bit less, because this is a lot right now.
Yeah.
So I guess find what's going to work best for you and go at that hard,
Yes, completely
maybe
agree.
spread yourself thin.
I completely agree. I always say find one or two platforms that really align with the way you authentically share your voice or your content, whether that's video, audio, or written. I always say the best is always going to be video, because you can do the most with a video when it comes to repurposing content, then audio, and then written. Written is last, because you can't do as much with the written form. However, focus on the form that's the most authentic and to you and that you're most passionate about. So I always say that, and then find one or two platforms, master them, be on them all the time. And then the other platforms, post on them occasionally, or just repurpose content that you're posting on the other two on those other platforms, and don't obsess about those as much as you do your one or two main ones.
Yeah, or redirect, like post a blog post and at the end of it be like, for more, check us out on Twitter or whatever.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
yeah. Put little teasers on the other platforms. Yeah. Micro content.
Things develop and shift so quickly. I mean, I feel like 2 years ago, everybody would go to somebody's Facebook page to figure out what was going on with them, right? And now it's like I'm hearing about all these things I've never even. So like, there's Patreon. There's what was the one you said? Is it StreamYard? Is that what you said?
StreamYard, yeah.
Yeah. So for podcasts, there's like all of these different opportunities now that I didn't even know the names of these things. And now it's like, okay, where are you going to find this person? And there's 6 different avenues where you can look them up. So for me, that's a little overwhelming. But for other people, maybe it's not. So,
and I mean, also, the more you focus on that stuff, like on social media and all these platforms, the less time you're focusing on what you probably really should be focusing on, which is your craft, your art, because you have to master your craft too. Because part of the reason those opportunities are coming to you and you're giving lessons and you're teaching at schools is because you have probably reached a level that people want, that people want to learn from, that people want part of their orchestras. So the main thing is, don't let that stuff take away from your craft.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a lot of the things that one thing that I like to talk about with students a lot is they'll go, Miss Allison, how much do you practice? And I'm like, but so, and that's such a hard question to answer, because kids want you to say like, well, I spend 3 hours a day on the violin and 1 on the viola, and then in the evening I also practice piano. And it's like, we're adults now, we don't have time. I mean, you've got a kid, I don't have kids, but I'm married, I have a house I need to think about. I've got 4 different avenues that I'm working in, and we just don't have, I'm in my 30s now, like we don't have the time or the resources to do the practicing that we did in high school, in college, in our early 20s. So when people say, how much do you practice? I'm like, I'm lucky to get an hour a day. I mean, lucky to get an hour a day. Yeah. And more likely it's that I have a gig coming up and I'm like, oh, okay, I have an orchestra rehearsal on Wednesday. It's Monday. Like, I need to look at that music. Let's go, kind of thing. And so I think people don't realize that as adults, as working adults, as professional musicians, we are not sitting around all day practicing. We're actually doing the other stuff. Like, the time for practicing was years ago. That was our development. That was the nascent beginnings of our career. That's when I had the time to be like, well, I don't have a lot of work today, so I'm going to really hone my craft. Now we just got to get up in the morning and we got to roll with it, and we got to get to that gig, and we got to sit down with TSO and play that music on no rehearsal. And, it catches up to you fast. So I would say to somebody who's in college or in high school, practice now. I mean, yes, your connections, but do your practicing now, because you're not going to be able to when life catches up.
And that's probably a better question, right? How much did you practice when you were in high school, middle school, and college? Not how much are you practicing now? I think that's probably a better question. Yeah.
It's like, so the prep for that happened years and years ago. In high school, I was able to do maybe 3 hours a day. And then even still, that's kind of a liberal estimate. But yeah, I mean, do the practicing while you have the time, because other things get in the way. Eventually you're going to want to have a family, and
That's good advice. That's really good advice. Do it now. Don't wait.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier too that you were doing some writing. What kind of writing are you doing?
Yeah. So this is very new. This is an example of how I pivoted during the pandemic. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, not just musicians, a lot of people went, okay, well, this is what I do for a living, but now I've got all this extra time and I want to find something else to do. So
Mhm.
one of the things I did is I grew all these different kinds of plants. Um, actually, wait, here, let me see. There, I don't know.
What kind of plants? Oh, fun. Oh,
So
wow.
it's
That's like a nice. That's one.
it's a whole like indoor garden. Yeah. So I spent a lot of my time doing plants. Obviously, I'm not making money off of it. It's a hobby. That's my hobby. But I started growing plants. I exercised more, and then the other thing I started doing was seriously writing.
Mhm.
And writing is something that I have always done. I mean, even since I was a little kid, I'm always making up stories and just being funny. And like back when Facebook was less poisonous, I would do, how they had the notes section,
Yeah,
where you could note. And
yeah.
so I would post something that was like, hey guys, I was thinking about this today. And those are the things I'll go back and retrieve and be like, hey, that's pretty good. And kind of set up a Google Doc or like email it to myself as like, I should expand on that sometime. And that's a whole essay, a whole story. And the more writing I did, the more I realized that I really wanted to be serious about it. And so there's a couple different avenues where that's an outlet for me now. One of them is I'm doing a lot for the Libertarian Party of Kansas.
Mhm.
During the Joe Jorgensen campaign, I was the communications director for that campaign in the state of Kansas. And
Nice.
obviously, that was very fast. We were constantly doing a lot for that. And so it seemed like every couple of days there would be like, hey, we need to get a press release out. We need to get this going. We need to contact the community, the county coordinators with this info or whatever, or contact the media, or So that was kind of my job with that. And then after the campaign, the state chair was like, "Want to keep doing it just for the state party?" And I was like, "Yeah, I already am, and I love
That's
it."
awesome.
It's an outlet where I can write about what I believe in and support kind of like libertarian ideas.
Mhm.
But it's for a purpose. It's not just kind of me private journaling. It's like my work is getting out there. It's being seen. So it's lpks.org is where you
Okay.
can find a lot of my writing. I do like interviews with people and I do um, articles, whatever the website is necessary. Oh yeah. He's pulling up something. Okay, yeah. So it's lpks.org is where you can find all the articles. That's one of the places that I've been writing a lot. The other one is I actually wrote an entire book during the pandemic. and I wanna just show it because I'm just so proud of it. But
Alley going rogue.
yes, I actually wrote and published an entire book, and I'm so proud of this project because it's a big deal and it took so much time. And just having a book in my hand of something that I wrote is the coolest
That's
feeling.
awesome.
Yeah, and to self-publish costs you almost nothing. I
Mhm.
use the Book Patch, which is like a little independent.
What was it? Batch?
The Book Patch, the Book Patch.
Book patch.
Yeah,
Got it.
so they are great. You upload a PDF of your content, make the cover look like what you want, and then you can buy your own book wholesale.
That's
So like
awesome.
for me to buy one copy of my book is like $10 less than what I'm charging for people to buy it, and I could
Mhm.
just sell it like a whole bunch for myself or give them away or whatever. But you can search this on the Book Patch, or I don't know, maybe your show notes page, we can put it up or
Yeah,
something.
I'll definitely put it up there. What's the book about?
So it's called Allie Went Rogue: How Being an Outlier Helped Me Think Clearly and Live Fully.
Okay.
So the book is about different stages of my life. Each chapter is a stage of my life where I was in some way an outlier. For example, I was homeschooled as a kid. So I never attended public school. So being homeschooled allowed me to avoid a lot of social issues such as bullying and peer pressure and all of these
Mhm.
things that students can kind of get caught up in,
Mhm.
as well as being kind of independent with my personality as well as my education
Mhm.
is what led me to be kind of a free thinker as an adult.
Right.
So it sort of follows the trajectory of like, okay, I was this isolated homeschool kid who was like constantly thinking and writing, and I spent a lot of time like in nature. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media, or we weren't constantly doing this, right? So, and then it moves on to like my years in college, where I went to a very progressive leftist school. I went to Oberlin College, which is like like top 10 in the country. It's up there with Berkeley and with,
Okay.
with these other schools that are just really out there
Right.
in terms of politics and progressivism. And I was not. I was
Mhm.
president of the Oberlin College Republicans and Libertarians.
Okay.
So, so it talked about that and how I was so different. And even at the age of 19, I was like, whatever, I don't care what anybody thinks of me.
Yeah.
And that just naturally segued into a freelance career where I have the confidence to advocate for myself as a player and as an employee. And I still consider myself to be self-employed. And so the book goes over all of these things. And I do think it has a lot of value for anybody who's a music student or a music business student or anything like that. The whole story of playing with TSO is in here. The whole
awesome.
story
Heck yeah.
of the
I'll
translation.
definitely be sharing that.
So that story is a good time. So it's a little bit funny and it's a little bit informative, and it's mostly just about what I know. It's about my life. So
How long did it take you to write the book?
Man, so I was working on it for about 2 years prior to the pandemic. I had
Okay.
little bits here and there. And then when everything shut down in like March or April, I went, okay, suddenly I have a lot of time on my hands.
Mhm.
And I think I'm just going to dig in and do this. And I always kind of knew that I wanted to write a book, but I didn't expect it to be this early.
Yeah.
So when everything happened and things shut down, I just kind of went, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the signal I've been waiting for. And so I just went for it. And now I have a book. It's 156 pages. You can buy it online. I
That's so
self-published
awesome.
it. Yeah, it was the coolest project. I think maybe besides some music things I've done, it was the coolest and most fulfilling thing I've ever tried. And I highly encourage everybody else to write a book. I mean, just do it. It's so easy.
How much of your day, like as you're like really writing, because you have your classes that you're teaching, you have your students that you have, like how much time a day like did you spend on writing the book? And
During the summer, it was different because during the
Yeah.
summer, I have a school job to think about. So
Yeah.
I remember there was one day this summer where I wrote for 14 hours. Like
wow.
I literally, that was like I had a lot of black tea that morning or something. I don't know what happened. I was really into it, and I was kind of like 90% done with the book, and I was so excited to like see it in its final form and get it up online. So I remember writing I looked and it was 1 a.m. and I had been going for 14 hours. That was so cool. That not normal.
Yeah.
I would say on average, I would do maybe, kind of same as music, like 2 to 4 hours a day of
Okay.
writing.
Mhm.
And then you have, and this was a huge learning curve for me. This is my first book. After you have all the content,
Mhm.
you then have to think about, oh my gosh, now I have to format and upload it to the website. And that
Mhm.
was like, I'm not kidding, that was like 3 weeks of work. Because I
Wow.
had all this content. I'm going, look at all this stuff I wrote. This is so great. And then I was like, but I wanted to have a cover. I wanted to
Mhm.
have a back cover. I had to find this picture. I had to format this. I had to figure out the font. I had to write a little blurb. I
Mhm.
mean, so much other work that goes along
Yeah.
with producing the content. So it was that was a huge learning curve for me. But that's one thing that came out of the pandemic that was positive. I just went,
Yeah.
okay,
That's awesome.
I've worked in music for so long. I'd like to try something else. So I
Yeah.
did.
I love it. That's so cool. Is it also available like on Amazon? Like where does it distribute through this platform?
Nope, it's just the book patch. And I did
Okay.
that on purpose. Yeah, I
Okay.
did that on purpose because excuse me, one thing is I wanted to support the website, and they don't make any money off of it. But what I mean by support is like show people this great resource that there is out there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you have a 10-page essay or a 800-page economic treatise. You can upload it to this site and get it for the cheapest that you're going to do, and then you just have a link that you share with everybody.
That's
And
awesome.
so it's a really, really cool resource, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But no, I stayed far away from Amazon. I stayed far away from other places that were going to like take a huge chunk of the profit.
Right.
I mean,
That's awesome.
I just
Good for you.
yeah.
I have an outline ready for a book, and I've had it ready for a while, and I don't know. I need to go for it. And
Do
I
it.
listen to Tim Ferriss sometimes too much, maybe, or too literal, where he talks about his books and like how painful it has been for him to go through that process and writing those books, and how much of your life you're sacrificing to write a book. And it's like, that just sounds too daunting right now with having a baby and all the other stuff going on. But
Yeah,
I think,
it's a lot. I'm not going to lie to you, but like, do it.
okay.
Make yourself do an hour a day or 2 hours a day or whatever, or 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day.
Right.
If you have an outline, your book is halfway done, because
Right.
part of a book is like, okay, I have all these thoughts and I have all this content, but how am I going to distill this into a readable resource? So
Right.
if you have an outline, that's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
just go for it, man. Like, I cannot say enough how cathartic it is and how fulfilling it
Yeah.
feels. So
Awesome. I've even thought about, since I like the audio form, like podcast form, I even thought about maybe for the first draft of the book, just doing maybe like an hour long podcast on it first, and then get that transcribed, and then use the transcribed text as like to edit the actual book. I don't know. Think about different ideas.
oh no, that'd be so fun. That'd be
Yeah.
one of the first things people ask me is, they're like, because I kept it real quiet, and then like in October I went, hey guys, I wrote a book, and everybody was like, what? And, it's way more fun to like keep this is actually kind of professional advice too. Keep what you're doing sort of under wraps. And when it happens, people are super excited and amazed, and like they totally respect you, because otherwise you're like, hey man, we have some exciting things brewing. Keep an eye on, and then when it actually shows up, you're like, okay, here's this thing they've been promoting, right?
Right.
But with this, I kept my cards really close to my chest, and I was like, I'm not going to say anything about this. And when I did, everybody was like, that's so great. But one of the things that I kept being asked is it in audiobook form? And so I don't know if that's something that maybe would be, I mean, like I said, I'm pretty old school. I like books that you can flip through. I like the
Right.
I mean, I like taking this outside in the backyard and laying down on the grass and reading, but audiobooks is also kind of like podcasts. I mean, it's such a cool resource that we have at our fingertips nowadays. So maybe consider that too.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun if we had an audiobook version of it as well. I think, because like a lot of people, like for me, for example, like, I mean, I love books too, and I love writing in them and highlighting and making notes. I make my own table of contents of where stuff is that I want to reference again. But sometimes we're busy, and I listen to an audiobook or a podcast like while I'm working out, or while I'm driving, or while I'm going for a walk. And I think an audiobook would be really cool too.
Yeah, it's time saver for sure. Because like you said, you have to find the time to sit down with the book in your hand and turn page by page and read the book. But so many people, I mean, I think that's one reason that podcasts have gotten so popular, is that you can do it as you're driving around, as you're, like you said, working out. I like to do it when I'm in my kitchen. I'm like cleaning my kitchen, or like unloading the dishwasher. It's like just basic things, right? But I'll have a podcast going, and that way you can, or an audiobook or whatever. So
that's awesome. What do you listen to? Which podcasts?
I mean, Tom Woods is my big one, I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I listen to Tom Woods show I listen to, I would say 3 times a week. So I mean, what does he do? I think he's Monday through Friday, isn't he? Like, he's got one,
he's like 5 days a week.
Yeah. So I'll catch probably 3 or 4 a week, and then sometimes even go back and pick up the one. I'm also really into Joe Rogan. I mean,
nice.
The guy is, I feel like millennials and younger and our generation, like, we get that Joe Rogan is bringing up some really legit stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's presenting it in a really accessible format. He is so incredibly neutral with everything.
Yeah,
like, he's got his opinions, but if you don't agree with him, you're not turned off by what he's saying.
Right.
So I love just the whole setup that he's got going on, and the fact that they go for 2.5 hours, like we were talking about, four scenarios or whatever to go through one of his, because they're just so long. But Tom Woods, Joe Rogan, Spike Cohen was our vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. He is a little out there, especially if you're new to libertarianism or to ideas of individual freedom or whatever. Spike is a little bit out there. He considers himself to be more on the anarchy train.
Anarchy side,
which I do too. I mean, I consider myself to be ANCAP. So I resonate really strongly with it, but that's not the first one that I recommend to anybody who's new to liberty. I mean, Tom Woods is super accessible, and it's not just him talking. It's him with economists and with historians, and the guests that he has on his podcast are totally relevant. They're fresh. They're interesting. And
he's a music lover and has musicians on the podcast too.
Yes, he's always in it. Yeah, I think it was episode number 3 that he ever did, like 8 years ago. He had Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. He interviewed him.
Oh, nice.
That was so cool.
I'll go back to that.
And then he recently had the guy from, oh gosh, who was it? There's another one that's recent. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, he's had lots of musicians. Not yet a classical musician, so I'm still holding out for that. But yeah, Tom's a big arts supporter, big lover of orchestra and ballet, and supports him not just with his money, but with his words, and so I appreciate that about him too.
Where would you say would be a good place to start for people that want to maybe learn a little bit more about libertarianism, or at least like the different philosophies of liberty?
I'm going to echo something you said with, I think it was when you were talking to, totally blanking on his name, Georgia guy.
Shane Hazel?
Yeah, Shane Hazel. So I think it was when you were talking to him and you said, the Federalist Papers, read the basic stuff that our country is founded on, because that is libertarian material. It's not libertarian in the sense of the modern party that we have. That's kind of like a reaction to two-party system that we've got going on and everything. So that is more like, this is what our country's founded on, and there's a reason we have such an idea of individual liberty. It's because it's in the very fibers of who we are as a country, as a nation, and the idea of like state sovereignty versus the federal powers and all of that. And go back to that stuff because it really sheds light on how far we've come from it. Then if you want to kind of, there's a book by Matt Kibbe that's called it's a libertarian manifesto. It's called Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff. Something like that. So it's basically like, this is the very essence of libertarianism. Now I get into the really, really dirty stuff. I read like Murray Rothbard and like Ludwig von Mises and all of the kind of like,
I just started von Mises.
that's a rabbit hole. Like
it
if
is.
you now, the other thing that I would recommend is Ayn Rand, but not the Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead and all that. She has a book called, it's going to escape me. I'm going to look it up. It's about objectivism. I need to just look it up really quick. But basically, it's a really good understanding of its objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, which is actually by one of her colleagues, Leonard Peikoff. And so they go over all this idea of like objectivism and how it relates to individual liberty and why these things are so important and why you are not selfish if you consider yourself to be in that camp. It's actually like, if you take care of yourself and your family and then you rely on voluntary transactions with other people and interactions, you are healthier, you're happier, and the people around you are benefiting from what you have to offer. And it's a very balanced world that we can live in. So highly recommend Ayn Rand, just not the 800-page stuff. Go for more of the basics, the essays that she wrote, stuff like that. So
cool, awesome. That gives me some
also
resources for me.
Also pretty cool that she was a lady in kind of the libertarian camps, because there's like not many of those.
That's awesome.
It's a little bit of a sausage party at the state conventions and stuff. So it's always nice to be like, Ayn Rand, one of the founders of the libertarian movement, and also happens to be a woman. So there's that.
Yeah, and that Libertarian Party could use some more diversity for sure.
Oh my gosh. And I would also say as a parting thought on that, just get into everything Ron Paul ever did. There's a reason that dude is the GOAT. He took the ideas of liberty and of living the freest life that you can while being civil and respectful of other people, and he turned that into a very accessible, livable format while being like, okay, but you can't be complacent. Like, you got to actually fight against the system we have. Dude is, I don't know how he did it. I mean, I think he's just brilliant.
He is totally.
Yeah. So he did write a couple books, but I mean, look him up on YouTube. Look at his parting address to Congress when he was like, "Peace out, y'all suck, and here's why." I mean, it's one of the most influential things I've ever experienced. So yeah, definitely go there as well.
I'll try to remember to throw that one in that video in the show notes. It's a good one. I've been on this real, like, I got on this quest for knowledge and what is good government and what makes a good person. And
the rabbit hole.
What was that?
The rabbit hole. You got sucked in.
The rabbit hole. Yes. But I started off like studying like really like deeply and in depth about like the founding fathers, and like I literally would spend hours on each of like the first, I think I did the first 7 presidents, so all the way up to Andrew Jackson. And then I was like, the ones that inspired me the most, I noticed a little bit of controversy with Thomas Jefferson, but at least his politics and his like philosophies and his ideas for government, like that really inspired me. So I was like, let me look at the people that he looked at and the people they looked at. And so I actually ended up going all the way to Lao Tzu from China, the ancient Chinese philosopher, and then to the Greek philosophers, to Aristotle and Plato, and slowly working my way back up to where I left off. But I just finished Meditations from Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, some Stoic philosophy in there, and kind of in the middle of John Locke. And then also like, I was like, okay, this whole process is taking so long. Let me like go to what all these libertarians talk about. Everyone talks about Ludwig van Mises, and I was like, I need to learn about this stuff since I'm like getting deeper and deeper in it. I can't say I haven't read any from van Mises yet, and say I'm a libertarian and be a voice for libertarians if I haven't read that yet.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I mean, I would just disagree in the sense that you, first of all, you can call yourself whatever you want. I mean, I think you are. Yeah. You've got great ideas. I respect that. That's a very specific, like the Austrian economics is right. Kind of a corner of libertarianism, right? So if you don't make it that far, or if it's like too dense or whatever, or maybe there's somebody out there who's like, yeah, I believe in this stuff, but dude, I can't read 700 pages of Mises. Like that's
insane. Yeah, it's massive. It's the audiobook's 18 hours.
Do you find that I was wondering about this actually, like I tend to really focus on the newer stuff, the modern stuff, like, and when I say modern, I mean like founding fathers, moving up. But it sounds like you're going all the way back to like the ancients.
I did, yeah, for a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean that's so cool because that's so foundational to like human culture. I mean, you're going so much farther back. But do you find when you do that it's easier to kind of cut through the crap that we hear all the time, and you're just like, well, look, here's this really basic principle of whatever it is, of freedom or of communication. Mm-hmm. You can apply that and you can get rid of all the other stuff that's surrounding it.
Absolutely. Because you find like, so one thing I always look for is consistencies in things, because I feel like the truth lies usually in the things that are consistent. So there's a lot of consistencies going, go all the way back to Lao Tzu and working your way up to the founding fathers. But even like if you read the Bible, like there's consistencies even within that, like whether you believe in the Bible or not, like or Christianity or not, but there is some great lessons to being a good human being, to having a good community, and even like government. I mean, people, even in the Bible, they talked about wanting to anoint a king or elect a king, and God was like, why do y'all need a king? Like, you have me. Like, you don't need a king, you don't need government, because it's just going to ruin everything. And look what happened. It ruined everything. And
here we are. Yeah, well, no, I agree. And I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to look just like, I mean, I consider myself I actually consider myself like Christian agnostic, right? But I come from that tradition of like, I went to a Methodist church. We read the Bible-based gospel and that kind of thing. And there are things in the Bible that directly translate, like the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule are the very principles of that is what the non-aggression principle is.
Right. Yeah.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.
Right.
And don't take your friend's wife and don't steal their stuff.
Right.
And don't take their money and and don't murder. I mean, it's right there. So
just be a good person.
That's pretty foundational. Don't kill people. So yeah, you can take basic ideas from centuries and centuries ago, and millennia ago, and you can apply it to today.
Right.
In a way that's accessible and that makes sense and that everybody can kind of get behind. So
yeah, and like speaking of all of the things we've talked about and everything, like like what doesn't work, like of course, like people that are more libertarians, especially like people that are more on the anarchist side, like you can't have, like, if you're going to be part of a society, like you can have be very libertarian in your house, but once you go out and you're part of a society, like it never works if it's just my way all the way or the highway, right? And I feel like that's what it is right now. That's why there is so much divisions. And it's mainly between like the left and the right. And as libertarians are just like throwing our hands up, like, all of you guys are crazy right now. But it's to really what I've learned from all these books, kind of tying that all together, is it's about having empathy for other people, even if they completely disagree with you or you completely disagree with them, but finding common ground. Like first, let's start off on the things we agree on, and then see how much we're able to sacrifice for both of us. You know, we shouldn't ever have a completely libertarian country, even though I love that, or a completely conservative or completely liberal or definitely not authoritarian, right? But it's about finding a place in the middle where everyone's going to be okay, or at least be able to accept it. From all the issues that people debate about and talk about all the time, like we have to just find a good kind of middle ground. And on some issues, it's going to be 50-50. On some issues, it's going to lean a little more this way. And some other issues, it's going to be a little more that way. But I feel like the danger is in being 100% in one direction and everything else is bad. And if you're think just a little bit differently, you're canceled and you're lose your job, whatever.
I totally agree with you. So what you're describing is extremism, which obviously we want to stay away from. But I would add to that certain ideologies say that we can only have it this way if everybody falls in line.
Right.
And so libertarianism is there's that whole meme about like, yeah, libertarians trying to take over the world so we can leave you alone. so it's like let's say Jo Jorgensen was elected. What would she actually do to hurt anyone? The answer is nothing. She's going to pull these things, or any. It doesn't have to be Joe. I mean, like anybody who's elected to the libertarian office. The idea is removing barriers and removing things. It's not about, okay, now everybody in the country has to be libertarian. No, what we believe is that everybody in the country needs to be what they want to be, and we're giving you the space and the freedom to do that. So one of the things I talk to my sister a lot. She's a I hope I don't get this wrong. I think she considers herself to be some kind of like democratic socialist. Mm-hmm. And so she, or, you know, democratic socialism basically. And so one of the things we talked about the other day is I said, look, for you to believe in democratic socialism means that everybody around you also has to be a part of that system. But for me to be libertarian, I can live next door to you and you can be whatever you want to be.
Right.
Right. But like in your society, I'm not free to be what I want to be. So it doesn't work both ways.
Right.
And so in my mind, libertarianism, not even big L, you know, they talk about big L liberty and small L libertarianism means everybody can be and live how they want to live.
Yeah.
That is simply not true under a Republican, under a Democrat, under a Green Party, even is actually more socialist than they'll let on, because that's how they enact their policies. Is through authoritarianism. So libertarianism to me is the one principled philosophy, not to say political party, because those can be, but it's the one philosophy where everybody can be free, and you just aren't going to have that any other way.
Right. It's true. One thing I would like to challenge people to try as, at least as an exercise, right? Doesn't mean you have to obviously be like try to become a libertarian or whatever, but I heard Larry Sharp say this really cool thing the other day, and I don't know if he teaches at a school or if he has his own like little program where he teaches people. He was talking about like his students and how whenever they try to come up with a solution to a problem or an issue, he challenges them to be creative enough to think about ideas where government, force and coercion, or raising taxes is never an answer to a solution, right? So I want to challenge people as an exercise, like all the different issues that you care about and that you advocate for and fight for, see if there's solutions to those things that doesn't involve government, force and coercion, or raising taxes, because a lot of libertarians want similar results as progressives, but the path to get there is extremely different, where progressives choose more government because either they don't know any better or they truly just believe government's the answer. But libertarians are always going to say less government, no force and coercion, and no raise taxes. But the solution at the end of the day is the same, like decriminalize drugs and whatever else, I mean, all the other different issues.
Yeah, free it all up. Just free it all up.
Yeah. Free it all up.
And I even would say not less taxes, but just get rid of it.
Yeah. Of course,
just
ideally, right?
Just abolish the IRS and end the Fed. I mean, honestly, that's I know that's kind of an extreme, but I started as a minarchist, meaning meaning minimal government.
Mhm.
And just the more you kind of go down the rabbit hole, the more you learn about it, the more you realize that it's just not sustainable, because anybody who gets power, it's like Spike Cohen uses the analogy of the Lord of the Rings. Like, anybody who gets the ring in their hand, they're not going, well, this powerful thing needs to be cast into the fire. I mean, everybody comes under the spell of the power and they go, well, I could use this. And they start to think about what they could do with that ring in their hands. Government is no different. So the government got the ring of power and it went, I
Mhm.
wonder what else I could do with this. Like, nobody ever gives up. Nobody relinquishes power of
Right.
their own action. So
Right.
so that's why libertarians believe in decentralizing everything. Just spread out the power. You know, like Spike says, you are the power. I mean, the people are the
Mhm.
power. So if you give that to any one institution, it's going to become overwhelming and it's going to hurt other
Yeah.
people. So
We-
that's where we need to kind of get rid of that. But it's been very interesting being a libertarian in music, because
Yeah, for
most
sure.
of them aren't. Most
Yeah.
of them aren't. So I've had very interesting discussions, and I do feel as though I live my principles as a
Mhm.
libertarian, in the sense that I am fully self-employed. So yes, I work for this school and I work for that college, and I get, a W-9 from here and I get a W-2 from here, and that's
Mhm.
true. But for the most part, I am self-employed and I choose what of those gigs I'm going to take, because I want to be free to make my own decisions. So I believe that living that way, and doing my taxes independently, I believe that this is how I can live it out. And I
Mhm.
share this with my friends. I go, yeah, you can take a full-time job with the orchestra where they're going to dictate every move and all the money you make and all of that, or you can be self-employed. That's the greatest way to
Mhm.
live out the principles of what you believe, if you are
Yeah,
liberty leaning. So
absolutely. Yeah. Before I get to the next topic, just wanted to make a quick comment. We need to take, because he's Lord of the Rings, we need to take all of DC and take them to the pits of Moria.
oh yeah, throw them in.
Throw them in
Throw
there.
'em all of it.
Get
Well,
the
it's like
third ring. Destroy it.
Trump says drain the swamp. And so
Yeah.
cast them into the fire. That's what they say in Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings. So yeah.
um, one last topic I wanted to get into with you, because I kind of want to make, I guess, like start building a liberty movement within the music industry, and finding issues within the music industry where maybe liberty philosophies could maybe be implemented, or maybe change the way the industry operates, right? Because it's not just in government. Like you said, you use those principles in your own life and the way you live your life and the decisions you make. Like, is there anything in the music industry you think that, where there's too much control, whether it's by the government or the industry, if the industry is the government of the industry, like where the industry could change to be, I guess, more free? Or
That's a really interesting question. Oh man, that's probably that could be a whole separate podcast, really.
yeah.
It's always interesting to me, making the parallel between a government system and the hierarchy of that, and the authority
Mhm.
of that whoever is at the top has.
Mhm.
And then you look at a symphony orchestra, because again, I mean, that's my experience, is mostly classical music.
Mhm.
So you look at a symphony orchestra and you've got, let's say, 100 players
Mhm.
who are all independent musicians trained on their own, and they come together and they're under the rule, if you will, of a
Mhm.
dictator, which is the
Right.
conductor. Now,
Right.
that's not to say that conductors can't be kind,
Mhm.
musical, wonderful individuals. A lot of them are.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, those musicians are all gathering together and they're taking instruction from essentially an authoritarian leader.
Yeah.
So whatever the conductor says goes. He picks the music, he chooses the rules, he chooses how the music is going to flow. You could, I guess, correlate that to like a symphony board, which
Mhm.
also, or symphony management, or whatever you want to do. But this is a little bit of a tangent, but I do think that's a little bit why the music industry tends to be
Mhm.
less individualized and less
Mhm.
liberty leaning, is because we're
Mhm.
all used to a place where we show up, sit in our chairs, and we do what we're told.
Right.
That's the hierarchy of a symphony orchestra. Nobody questions it. And if they do, they risk getting fired because, oh, you don't want to be a part of it? Okay, you don't have to be in an orchestra, right?
Yeah.
So do I think that should change? Not necessarily. And also, we're past the age of, there was like this golden era in the 50s of these typically white male conductors who would
Mhm.
just be absolute tyrants. I
Mhm.
mean, so these guys would get on the podium and they would be abusive. all kinds of human rights violations all over the place. Anything you can think of. I mean, it was just a horrible working environment. So obviously that has been overturned. We're not there anymore.
Right.
We have symphony boards that are made up of musicians that help that, so they can kind of advocate for themselves and their fellow players. I don't know that within the classical industry there's anything that really, I don't want to say nothing, but there's not a lot that really needs to be revamped. But what I see a lot of is the public schools and the colleges, which of course are government institutions.
Right.
So a symphony orchestra is run by either a private organization that's owned by someone, or it's taking donations and that's what helps it run, and or it's run by a symphony board who's making those decisions for it. When you get into a public high school or you get into a college, like you and I teach at these colleges as an adjunct, you are not making any of your rules.
Right.
So in that sense of teaching music, that's where things can be changed. But I really think that's more of an issue of the education system and not music. I'm very lucky. I've never been in a situation where I felt that I was being taken advantage of in music. I mean, part of that is that I've always stayed very independent. So,
right.
But I feel like you wouldn't have asked that question unless you had an answer to it. So actually, I'm kind of curious what you think, because I bet you have a better answer.
So one of the things, and part of it is also I'm like digging for different like things to fight for within the music industry. And you made an interesting point, like with the, like if you work for an orchestra, right, that you kind of in a way just give up your freedoms in a way to the conductor, to the dictator. And what that kind of made me think of, like, so the one issue that I'm thinking about right now, it's crazy in the music industry how easily musicians give up some kind of freedom or some kind of ownership. So the one I am alluding to is your masters, right? So if you're a recording artist, one of the things they so easily give up is their masters to these labels. And then, they have to like bow down to these super powerful multi-billion-dollar labels because they own their masters now. And if they want anything to happen with their music, like they don't own their music anymore. The labels own everything. And I want musicians to fight for, like, the reason those deals exist is because musicians keep signing them. And if they stop signing them and they start fighting back, those deals will change. Those deals will no longer be on the table. So I'm trying to be an advocate for there being more deals that are either where the master is being leased for a certain amount of time, and then after that time is over, the master is returned back to the artist, or the artist has an option to buy back their masters or earn back their masters. So if they get, even like say $100,000 advance, you get like a royalty rate that goes towards the master. But I feel like once the master is paid back, they should own it, because yes, I know the label's argument is we're taking all the risk. You don't have to pay this back, right? It's not a loan. It's literally in advance that you never owe back. You never have to. It's never going to go to the credit bureau and where your credit score is going to go down or anything. Like, we're taking that risk, and that's like their argument. But you're also only paying the artist between 8 and 15%, if you're lucky, that goes towards the master, right? So for every dollar you make, only say 10 cents goes towards the $100,000. So the label's making 90% of all the sales. So once the master is paid back from that 10 cents per dollar, which takes a long time to get there, I feel like the label has made their money and the artist should have their master back. So that's a big thing I'm advocating for right now.
I knew when you asked that question, I knew you had a very detailed answer already. So yes, there's always things that can be changed or updated or better suited to protect musicians' rights and protect their product and their not just their creative output, but their intellectual property. There's always things that can be done better. It just kind of depends on the industry, I think. But man, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to read about that now. As you just opened up a whole new, like, I don't have a lot of experience in that with like a studio, so that's something I want to go research.
Yeah, dive into it. Let me know what you think. we can catch up again and get some thoughts of what you learned. Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, I hope I do. You've already got a very well developed philosophy, so I don't know if I can add anything to that, but I'll do my best. And then, so here's what we'll do. When we're done with this podcast, I'll go read about this, and then you read about the Austrian economist, and then we'll have another talk, and we'll exchange.
Let's do it. We'll do a round 2. I love it. Let me throw in a few like last little fun questions that I ask everyone. When you think of the word successful, who's the first person that comes to mind?
The first person?
Mhm.
Oh man, myself? Is that terrible?
Sure, yeah. That's great. It's great to think of yourself as successful, right? Because especially as a musician, because when we think of success within the music industry, we always look at these giant like figures like, you know, Taylor Swift and Jay-Z and like these giant mainstream stars, and not just in music, but even like people at that level, like The Rock and Gary Vee or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, but is that really successful? Like does success also mean many other things, that it's not just fame and money? And like what is success? Like I think at the end of the day, happiness is success. And if you're loving what you're doing and you have full freedom doing what you're doing, like that's successful too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's, I mean, I consider myself to be successful because my standards for myself are pretty high, and I have met them, and I'm really proud of what I've accomplished. So yeah, at risk of sounding egocentric, I mean, I think there's a difference between tooting my own horn and being like proud of what I've done. So
yeah, you should be proud of what you've done. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's awesome that you were, you know, able to stand up for what you believe in and walk out from the symphony and, you know, say, you know what, I still have other revenue streams and I'm just going to focus on those. And yes, it's going to suck for a little bit, but I'm still able to support myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can, you know, people like you and I can talk about this all day and all year and all pandemic. But it's not really going to make any difference unless we start acting it out. Actions speak louder than words. So if you believe something, quit talking about it and go do it.
Yep. I love it. Yep. I love that quote, especially nowadays, right? Because like cancel culture is all about something that you've said, but not necessarily something that you did. So it's like the actions. Yeah. I mean, people get condemned for saying something silly. Like I went up the bat for Drew Brees the other day or a while ago when he said, you know, he felt like kneeling for the flag is disrespectful. And I was like, regardless of that one thing he said, I've had the opportunity to work with him, and I have seen how he treats people, like literally from the janitor to the security guard to the person carrying out the food. Like every person to him mattered and treated them with respect. So people say stupid shit all the time. I've probably said plenty of stupid things that I shouldn't have said, or learn later, oh, maybe that was a little insensitive. But if as a character, you're always good to people and you treat them with kindness and with respect and you help others, like that's a good person to me. Like I don't care if you disagree with his philosophy on that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Just live it out. Just live it out. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you say. I'm not interested unless you're like showing me that you really believe that. So
yeah, absolutely. What was the first concert you've been to, or the first memorable concert experience?
The first, well, you can read about it in my book, but I do actually talk about it. There's a wonderful violinist. Her name is Leela Josefowitz. She's a Canadian-born violinist, virtuoso. It's the first live concert I ever went to. My dad took me. I was cool. I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years old. And I was kind of just getting into violin lessons. So he took me to see this girl play. And at the time she was like 18 or 19. And I was just totally enthralled. And it changed the course of my entire career because I wanted to play like her. And so that's what made me practice. That's what I shot for in my goals. And but I should add that I specifically liked the way that she played with fire and like with spirit. A lot of violinists, or classical musicians in general, a lot of them are very refined in the way that they have like a very delicate tone, and she was all over the place. She was ripping strings. She was like all of this extraneous noise, but she played with spirit, and I was so into it. And so that was the most memorable just because it was kind of the first big one. But I will say, as a side note, I got to see Earth, Wind and Fire perform live.
Fun.
Straight up the best show I've ever seen in my life. Those dudes, they had been going, I think it was like the 40th anniversary of the first show they ever put together. So they're all in their 70s and they killed it. They
They're
killed
so
it.
good. They're so good. I saw them at New Orleans Jazz Fest.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I would say a second. I just thought of this, but Victor Wooten too. He was amazing.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Victor Wooten.
and I got like really cheap tickets, and I was standing like 10 feet away from him in Beachland Ballroom in Cleveland. And man, that was a great show.
What
So,
was his show that day? Because he has all different types of setups.
man, this was years ago.
Was he with a band, full band? Was it just him and a drummer? Yeah.
It was a band. It was him. It was him. I mean, he did play a lot of solos, but he was with the band. And then he had a vocalist too. And I've been meaning to look up who she was. She was just amazing. This blonde female singer, and I think she's maybe the best voice I've ever heard. So I need to look who that is. But anyway, yeah, I would say Victor Wooten, Earth, Wind and Fire. I also got to see the Beach Boys and Jeff Beck.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Side by side, and that was really cool. So
Beach Boys was one of my last shows before everything shut down.
Oh, so they're still going, right? Aren't they still active or were?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're still playing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, they've been at it for a long time too. Yeah, my last show. I mean, my wife loved it. I mean, it was a really cool show, but I wish I could had a cooler concert as my last show. My last show was now I blanked on it. The dancing one, Dancing with the Stars, was my last show. I got to work. Yeah.
Depending who's on it, you know. Depending who's on it.
It was the. I don't know her actual. I always blank on her actual name, but Meredith from The Office.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she was nice. That was cool. And she was really nice. She was super sweet.
Oh,
what was the best advice you've ever gotten?
Use your unique perspective with your disease and feed it into your career and see where it leads you.
I love that.
So my professor in college was like, you know, you have this thing that's very unique to you. Don't ignore it. Use it as part of what you do and see where it takes you. And I did. And I had, as of last year, I had a bustling nonprofit that's been to 25 states in the country and raised awareness everywhere. And so that's been great. And then it led me to write my book. It led me to have more confidence on stage. I mean, he was really able to harness like who I was as a person and that into my career, because you are not just yourself and an instrument or a piece of computer equipment. I mean, you are a human being and a very nuanced, well-rounded, dynamic personality, and you need to build that into your career, I think. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's real good advice. And what is something you like? We've talked about a lot of things that we want to see change about our industry, but a question I always like to ask too is, what is something you like to see change about our industry?
Again, I kind of have to go on the classical vein. I'm sure that there's things that you see from your perspective, but from a classical mindset, we gotta branch out in our programming. Beethoven's great. He's there for a reason. Brahms is great. Bach is the father of Western music. I get that, but we gotta start bringing in overlooked composers. We have to, you know, I'm not huge into like woke culture and all that, but I do agree that minorities and women really deserve to be heard. In the classical world, there's not a lot of it out there, but we need to really be propping it up where it is. So I would say a change of programming. I mean, it's a little depressing that not 2020, but in 2019, you could go to a live orchestra concert and you open the program and you go, oh yes, Schumann's Ninth Symphony. Like, we've been listening to that for 200 years.
Right.
Let's get some new stuff on the program. You know, so the orchestras that are kind of stuck in the past is a little bit of a downer to me. I think we can do better. Also, if we're talking very, very relevant, what I would like to see change is the normalization of virtual formatting for music. And we talked about that at the very, very beginning, but if there's people out there who are trying to make that the new normal, like I said before, I don't accept it. I want to see it change into, look in 2020 how we branched off, look how there were some live shows, but then we also had some people doing this. Well, I'm not on that train. I'm not. If people do that, that's fine, but I really want to see people support live shows, whatever it takes. Put the masks on. I don't care. Put the masks on, limit the capacity of but don't shut down entirely. That's just ridiculous. Come on, man.
Yeah. I will say with the live streaming, if you use it as part of your business model and like your strategy of building an audience or making some revenue, cool. But if it's to replace the live show, I don't think that'll ever work in the long-term success of a career. But I get, because there's this one artist that's been on the podcast a couple of times. Her name is Dawn Beyer, and she made live cool before it was the thing that everyone had to do. Like her first year doing Facebook Lives every day for 15, 20 minutes, just like little quick ones, and I like those better as well. She, in her first year, she made $75,000 just from virtual tips. So like she does have a model that really works, but it didn't replace the live show. She still played shows. She did play a lot of house concerts in people's like living rooms and yards. And then as her brand built up towards the end, right before COVID hit, she was actually doing shows in theaters, and it was people that were flying in from all over the country who have seen her live streams or she's played in their living rooms before. So that kind of a model is cool. But yeah, if it's to replace the live experience, I don't think that's going to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not about it.
Yeah. So, but before I ask you the last question, just thanks so much for taking the time and for going long. You sacrificed a lot of your time for the podcast. And
I was actually really excited when you were like, how much time do you have? I was like, all day.
All day.
I mean, like I was telling you before, I've done, like, since this has kind of blown up, and I've been invited on multiple podcasts, including yours, and a couple of them, they were like, well, we have about 30 minutes. And I'm thinking, like, 30 minutes, that gets us through introductions. That doesn't go too far, you know? So yeah, it's really nice to let the conversation organically unfold and see where it leads you. I mean, we talked about everything from music to libertarianism to, I mean, we covered the whole.
We covered a lot of ground, and flipped back and forward from music and libertarianism and back again. I love it. It was so much fun. Thanks so much for this and for everything that you shared today, and for helping people learn a little bit more about liberty, but also for the musicians out there. I feel like they could learn a lot from the lessons you gave, not just on standing up for yourself and having a voice, but also like all the other lessons on how to build your career as a musician. So thanks so much for sharing.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Yeah. And then the question I ask everyone at the end is kind of really, you kind of already answered that, but what's your definition of making it?
Oh man, that's such a good question. The definition of making it is when you have reached a place in your career that you are happy with yourself and your product. That's it. That's it. To me, there's no monetary value on success. There's no definition of what is valuable except for what you put on your own work. So that's why I say, I mean, look, I'm 32 years old. I still have a lot of debt to pay off. I'm not, I'm in a rented house. I mean, I by no means am living in SoCal with like a mansion and a pool. I mean, I definitely have not made it by the world standards or by Hollywood standards or Nashville standards, but I have made it in the sense that I'm comfortable. My income is diversified, so I don't have to worry about where my next paycheck is coming from. I'm happy with what I do every day. I love getting up and working. I love the connections I've made with other people. And at the end of the day, I go to sleep happy with what I've produced. That's it. That's the bottom line.
Live the life you love.